Vinnie, thank you for having me in your house, man. It's nice to be here with you.
It's so great to finally meet you in person, and I'm so glad you could make the drive up here.
Your office did not disappoint. You guys can see all the magic behind me.
It all, in some way, is inspirational to me.
Yep.
And so it's a great place to be in, and I enjoy it quite a bit.
People that don't have offices like this don't understand how vital it is to just getting your daily work done.
Yeah.
Like having this stuff around you inspires you to be creative.
It does, and it has, even though there's a lot here, it does have a calming effect. There's a whole pattern to how I've laid everything out, and to me it makes sense.
We've all got our own system. So I've never seen a desk made of Hot Wheel cars. The actual desk is toys, which is amazing. I'm inspired.
One of the things I collect is Hot Wheels, but very specific Hot Wheels. So these are the designs that are not based on any realistic vehicles.
Yep.
All of these are fantasy vehicles that, you know, Mattel designed
Right.
over the years. And I originally started collecting this for my son, Michael, who is 23 now. And at some point when he was 13, we had these all mounted, you know, on his wall. Not as many as this that's grown.
Right.
But when he turned 13, he's like, you know, Dad, can we take it down?
Yeah.
And I was devastated. So then when I moved, I took it all with me and just keep telling myself I'm continuing to collect for Michael. But I'm really
Pretty sure it's
I'm
not
not
for
sure
Michael
how
anymore.
interested he really is.
Yeah.
But when I came here, I definitely needed a desk. And so I found this really great desk at IKEA. And I just like the way that these cases work. I still have some more space.
Yeah, because you do have some room on the back of the desk here.
Yes,
So who makes these cases?
There's a couple of people that make them off of eBay.
Any idea how many Hot Wheels you have in this room?
It's well over 1,000 now.
Right.
Yeah. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
Yeah.
13, 14, 15 cases at 109
Yep.
each.
Oh, you got Tech Wars hanging, man. That's a deep cut.
Yeah. That is every brand that I've worked on.
You worked on Tech Wars.
Yeah.
Exo Squad's my number 2 favorite brand.
Really?
I have the entire collection in box.
When I was at Playmates Toys, one of the things that we did was a series of different exclusives at KB, and that tooling was lying around.
Yep. Replay was the sub brand that it was
Yes.
put out under, and Tech Wars was a KB Toys exclusive.
Yes.
Fantastic. I love that brand. The cartoon was amazing. It was linear. It was serial. Each episode built on the previous one. It was very mature topics. There was slavery. There was death. I was 14 in 93 when that came out.
Wow.
And I had put away my G.I. Joes in 1990. No offense to you. I was just 11. I was 11 years old, okay? It was time. So anyway, I put away my toys in 1990, and Exo Squad got me back in stores.
Yeah.
It was only to buy the first wave,
Yeah.
but it shows the power of the media. And we will talk about how the loss of the cartoon for G.I. Joe was really the death knell. There was also a live-action movie that you guys were developing with Universal, and that got killed. And if you don't have any media, you can't stay relevant.
That's right. There were actually many versions of the movies that were being developed with several different studios over the years. I used to have 2 binders, each of them about this thick, filled with scripts of different movie iterations that have been done over the years.
So I knew of the one with Universal. You guys were developing a live-action TV series and a movie.
Yeah.
Right? Did they ever arrive at a budget on that?
No.
And did Hasbro ever get, like, what caused Hasbro to back away from developing that at that time?
I don't think it was actually Hasbro that backed away. I think it was the studio that backed away. And we approached a number of studios. And sometimes it was writers that were trying to bring together Hasbro and the studios. And sometimes it was our ad agency got involved at one point in time with an interest. Yep. Warner Brothers was interested in it at one point in time. Certainly Universal.
So why did all those efforts fail? I've heard previous interviews where the blame was kind of put on maybe Hasbro leadership for deciding not to invest in it, but you just sounded like maybe Universal didn't want to pull the trigger.
I think we were very early in trying to develop content. And I think that the way that we looked at it was, okay, we own the rights to the character. So you want to make a movie, okay, great. You'll pay us a royalty, and we'll sign off on the scripts, and you go make the movie and do all the advertising. That's not actually how it's done. There needs to be funding from a lot of different places in order to pull off a movie like that. And Hasbro just was at that time just not interested in that, didn't know how to do it, hadn't done it before. The closest thing that they had done was the old Clue movie. And that was a case where the studio wanted to do the movie, and we worked with them. That was long before my time, though.
Every person in this room has the perfect motive.
Stand back!
For murder.
What do you mean? Murder.
In the movie that makes a scene of the crime.
Someone did it!
Clue. It's not just a game anymore.
1985, 1986, Hasbro was spending money hand over fist. They were also making money hand over fist.
That's right.
And they invested in G.I. Joe, the movie, Transformers, the movie, My Little Pony, the movie. They went out, and I don't know who paid for those. Was that Sunbow? Was that Marvel? Was that Hasbro? Where did the funding come from?
It's a combination. All of those worked, right? Because, animated shows, when they live on and get into syndication, that's where they can, sort of pay a dividend for a really long time. But at the same time, there is usually, at least this day and age, when you're developing a TV show, there's got to be a share of the profits of all the consumables, all the product that's generated from it, whether it's licensed or core, as part of having, all parties sort of have skin in the game. At that time, I'm not sure that particular deal was kind of cut, but remember, Sunbow was a division of Griffin Bacall, and Griffin Bacall was Hasbro's main agency, helped to broker the deal with Marvel Comics, so it was all sort of in the family. We did spend a lot of money on developing the show over the years, and it's what gave the story about G.I. Joe and all the hundreds of characters we had developed and all the vehicles, and brought those to life so that kids would have something,
story
to sort of
to tell
base
themselves.
their imagination on.
Okay, listen up. Operation Big Lift is about to get underway. Get down too close to that lava and it's Barbecue City.
Anything that is in boys action needs some support of what is the story, because the kids don't need all of it, but they need some of it.
We need a groundwork. We're all going to have our own headcanon and tell our own stories, but if we don't have anything to start from, it's too much of a blank slate, too greenfield. The movies themselves might not have been profitable immediately, especially since G.I. Joe, the movie, didn't go out in theaters. Transformers didn't live in theaters very long. I think My Little Pony lost money too. But you have to look at the long game of the fact that it's shoring up demand for that intellectual property for years to come, and all the products you're going to sell, either Hasbro produced or third-party licensees, and kind of say maybe that loss is kind of, it actually turns into a moneymaker because of keeping the brand relevant.
Oh, right. I mean, I can go right downstairs on my TV, call up Tubi, and I can see vintage Transformer and G.I. Joe episodes now.
Right.
Somebody's getting paid.
And Hasbro's got them all streaming on YouTube, and they're charging advertising on those.
Exactly.
So, they're making a little bit of money there, too.
Yeah.
So you get to make money off of it in perpetuity. I'm certain eventually it broke even.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that created any of that hesitance to invest heavily in media properties several years later.
Everything's great if toys are selling, right?
Because that's your primary revenue driver.
That is. If they start to decline, then you start to look at how much do we invest? We're investing in product. We're investing in advertising. Do we really need to invest the show after the show's been out? I mean, who doesn't know who G.I. Joe is? And that's kind of reasonable, right, to think that way. But at the same time, if you pull back and you look at what was going on in boys action, you went from a handful of properties to dozens, all having programming. With the advance of cable, it became almost limitless because you had places to watch those shows. And the retailer saw all of these shows were coming, and some of them were based on theatrical properties like RoboCop, other ones were fresh like Exo Squad, but all of them had investment behind them to first create a show that they could run advertising off of to make their money and to get those residual payments, but also to find a way to do product that was based on that. And there's only so many dollars to be spent. And kids are very much samplers. And so they will try a lot of different things and play with them together. When Toy Story first came out, and you see Andy playing with all these different toys all together, that is how kids play. They sample a lot more than just being dedicated to the one thing.
Yeah, and so once you got Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers and
Masters of the Universe,
Chuck Norris Karate Commandos, Mr. T, like literally Rambo's got a toy line. That's not kid appropriate.
Yeah,
Like literally
exactly.
everybody in the late 80s, early 90s had a toy line.
Yeah, and it was all growing.
Yeah.
Right? So there was an audience, and only after many years after that, after there was such a proliferation of, animated TV shows, did you really start to see the clog.
Yeah.
And then it became, as it is now, very difficult for retailers to really want to take a risk on anything that's brand new that hasn't been proven, because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
The last time I took a look at the list of all the different animated shows that were new, that were being developed for a given year, was over 9,000 shows.
Oh, wow.
So how can any of them really break through?
So then you have some like Paw Patrol, for
Yeah.
example, right? That'll break through. It'll be on for several years. It'll take over. All the kids will know it. It'll eventually become ubiquitous.
Right.
But that's one out of thousands that cut through the white noise.
And it's really difficult for anything to really last forever. And definitely has to get reimagined. I mean, Transformers has been reimagined a number of different times. But it has to make sense too, because if you do a show just for the sake of doing the show, and there's no real reason to do the toys to it, you're not going to sell anything. And Paw Patrol is one of those that did break through. Cocomelon is another one that's actually, got a lot more heat behind it.
I was so happy when my daughter transitioned from Cocomelon to Paw Patrol. The Cocomelon animation is just not good, man.
They have found a way to create new episodes every single week.
Very cheap.
Very cheap.
That was the South Park model.
Yeah.
They created we'll just say an easier animation style, and they cranked out the content.
That's right.
And it was consistently hilarious.
Yeah.
So South Park's still going.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so let's dig in. So you started at February 1989.
Yeah.
Moved on to G.I. Joe summer of 1990. What did you do before then? What led you to Hasbro?
I was always creative. Built model kits as a kid, and drew and all that kind of stuff. And when I went into high school, I saw myself as being a graphic designer. That's what I wanted to be. And I went to Boston University for 2 years and just didn't feel the curriculum was enough into design. It was a lot of core drawing, painting, sculpting. And I really wanted to get into graphic design right away. And I was able to get some internships along the way that really got me excited.
Yeah.
So I ended up transferring to Massachusetts College of Art and Design.
Nice.
Junior year, they gave you a thesis project for 2 years. So you could pick anything. It had to be based on graphic design or whatever your major was.
Right.
And you were getting ready to basically put forth a big body of work about history of what you were trying to convey. What's the competition? What does the world look like right now?
Right.
And then what are you doing that's going to change all that?
Okay.
What's your ideas? So I was into graphic design at the time. And it was 1984, and Transformers had just come out, and all my little cousins got them for Christmas. And I was looking at these things, and I had never seen before, and I thought they were fascinating. And all of a sudden, I said, I'm going to do my own line of transforming robots. So I did all this research about who was in transforming robots. So you had Tonka, you had Hasbro, you had Bandai, you had Takara even had some of their products already here, but not called Transformers. And all these other companies that were creating different kinds of robot forms.
Right.
So I pulled all that stuff together.
Market research.
I ended up not understanding that that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
Put together my own product line. Created a commercial with the storyboard and music that a friend of mine created, the comic book that went with it, another friend of mine created.
Oh, wow.
I put it all together, built the model, and did the presentation, which was normally in just a conference room or things like that. But I had this vision of doing something that hadn't been done before. So I got permission to use the auditorium.
Okay.
And the screen was 4 stories tall.
Wow.
And so I had this big, huge slideshow going on where robots were life size.
Yeah.
And because of that, because of all the work that I did, I actually was the first student at Mass Art that was granted honors on the spot.
Wow.
And that moment, I said, I really want to work for a toy company.
Yeah.
So I took what was a graphic design portfolio and started, looking, where do I go? And of course I went to Hasbro, but I wasn't even graduated from college yet. And they just didn't, you need to have some experience before you come here.
Sure.
And I tried all the major toy companies.
Right.
And I ended up sending a resume to Revell Model Kits, who had just been purchased by a private equity firm who owned Monogram models in Chicago. And that got on the desk of the Monogram product manager, and they contacted me and they wanted me to come out and be a product manager, which I did not know what that was.
Right.
So I flew out to Chicago. I met him at the airport. Yeah. He kind of explained to me what it was. I showed him my portfolio, and they made me the offer, and I went in, and I didn't do any graphic design.
Right.
But I got my hands into everything. So sales and marketing and pricing and sourcing and going to all of these Asian countries to see how product was made and understand how we would make deals and all the rest of that.
Yeah.
And I was there for 3 years. It was my great first job.
Yeah.
And then I was recruited to go to Hasbro.
So it's basically your master's program.
Yeah, exactly.
Your thesis sounds like you were doing the job of a brand manager or a marketing person.
And didn't know it. It was a lot of fun. It got me hooked into certainly collecting robots, but then it got me into action figures and then die-cast vehicles, and those are the kind of things I like.
So when you came on at Hasbro, February '89, what role were you hired into?
Transformers.
A Transformers brand manager or
Transformer brand manager.
Okay.
And the reason I got the job was because I knew everything about it and was really surprised because I did not understand the relationship between Takara and Hasbro and how they developed the product.
Right.
So I learned that whole story and saw how Transformers was created in Japan but then remarketed in the United States and how different that really was from one to the other.
So when you came on 1989, brand manager of Transformers, what was going on with the brand at the time?
Well, it was in decline,
right.
Because it had such a big year in 1986, and that was the year the movie came out. It's also the year that they retired Optimus Prime and they brought in other characters, a lot of upheaval.
By retired, do you mean murdered?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Just clarify.
And I took over when they were on the tail end of doing The Pretenders, and I remember seeing Hasbro Design's involvement in different things. And then as that year went on, I took on WWF action figures, which was new to Hasbro at the time, and worked on both of those before they moved me over to G.I. Joe.
Yeah, because the WWF stuff was actually with LJN right before that.
Yes.
And Hasbro Direct made a competing figure of Sergeant Slaughter.
That's right.
Even in the marketing materials for that, they showed him on top of other LJN figures. Yeah. So it was like a no-holds-barred marketing attack on LJN.
It was. And LJN was, I think, getting ready to kind of go out of business.
Were they?
And so it was a big shift that went on. And of course, we did the figures in a different way, but it was a lot of fun. I got to meet a whole bunch of the wrestlers at the commercial shoots, and it was a lot of fun. They were all so super nice.
You gotta love new WWF figures with real wrestling action. Match Andre the Giant against the Ultimate Warrior. Andre'll squash the Ultimate Maniac. WWF figures so close to the real thing, it's like being in the ring.
Okay, so you worked on Transformers. It was contracting at the time. You worked on wrestling.
It was starting.
What got you to transition to G.I. Joe?
My boss, Kirk, came on board and decided to make the change.
So Bazigian, was he vice president of Boys Toys at this point?
Yeah. Yes, he came from Play School Baby, where they promoted him to VP.
Yep.
And then he started making changes as to who was going to work on what lines.
Yeah.
And also what was going to be kind of the guiding factors for the design and engineering group of what we tried to make happen, what we tried to achieve.
So he's basically like the head coach, and you guys are all playing for him, and he decides who's going to be in what role.
He came with a lot of street cred.
Yeah.
He had been on it when it was launched in 82.
From 81. We're doing the R&D in 81.
Yeah, and so he knew it was well respected for it, was promoted to move to Play School. In people's career, it doesn't always stay on one particular brand for.
Sure.
Sometimes it does, but not all the time.
Yeah, he also got pulled to work with the Jose Banks guy to help build the Hasbro Direct business for a couple of years.
That's
right. 84, 85, and then he was on Play School Baby as well. So he did a couple other things. He helped to build the brand first few years, was taken off. It wasn't that he chose to leave, it's that's just what happens, right? So then he comes back kind of victorious. Now he's the head coach, he's the vice president of Boys Toys, and he gets to put people in whatever position he wants.
Right.
And so he picked you from Transformers and WWF, kind of poached you away from those and put you on G.I. Joe.
Yep.
What was your response to that? How'd you feel about it?
It was funny. I really liked the work that I was doing on Transformers, but I didn't like the fact that we were headed in a direction with Transformers where we were going to be doing them as non-transforming action figures. That was not a call that I had a lot of input into.
Yeah.
And when they did that and we called them Action Masters, I liked the figures, but the fact that our product line didn't have the figures transforming and the vehicles instead did, it felt more like Mask than it did really about Transformers. It was good to be kind of away from that. And going on to G.I. Joe, I'd always been a fan of G.I. Joes. I had a couple of the 3 3/4 inch figures, and I remember having the Cobra Ice Wolf, because I just thought the design of it was just spectacular. And I remember my very, very first year at Toy Fair, I got a chance to go through the Hasbro showroom, and it was immense. It was huge. And when you got into G.I. Joe, which was the biggest room they had, I remember seeing the shuttle complex.
Okay, Hawk, it's operational!
Like taking candy from a baby!
Get the shuttle complex ready for launch!
2, 1! We have liftoff!
And just being just amazed that they could make all these different things and how well it was displayed. I mean, it was beautifully done, beautifully done.
Which, by the way, the Defiant's right over there in the corner. So still a fan.
A huge fan of it.
It's a mind-boggling hunk of plastic. It's just, I don't think they'll ever make anything that complex again, you know.
It's the biggest play set for an action figure that's ever been made.
Yeah.
With the most amount of it being tooling. There are other ones where they have like lots of monorails and things like that, and they kind of spread out. But
oh, sure, like the flag is 7.5 feet long, but the flag doesn't consist of as much plastic and as much detail. It's not like the Mobile Command Center that just folded back 3 times and it's essentially 3 hollow boxes.
Right.
You know, it's not like the Defiant where you just keep opening and opening and opening, and there's more compartments and more details and more molds.
And the effect goes up and down, and it's never going to be another one like that.
Right. So you were a fan coming in. Was this the type of thing where once you got on the brand, you started to figure out who did what, and you were having fanboy moments and like talking with people?
No. There is a gauntlet of fire that you must make your way through when you get onto the G.I. Joe collective team.
Yeah.
They knew that I was going to come over there before I did.
Mm-hmm. Did Kirk ask around?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of this guy? What do you think of this guy?
I'm sure he did.
Okay, yeah.
And you are greeted over there, and they do welcome you.
Right.
But you have to prove to them
that you're bringing value,
that you know what you're talking about, and that you're not just wanting to do your ideas, you're wanting to make the business grow. With marketing, you're talking to the consumer. That's what you're supposed to be understanding.
You're the voice.
How do you get the consumer to want to participate in the brand and all the things that you want to do with the brand?
Right.
The design team is really creating things from nothing. That is, I think, a longer and more intense process. But a marketing person, it's a different kind of pace, and I think you can get burnt out doing those same things so often, and there's a tendency of just wanting to try something different. And kind of move around.
So like Kirk, I felt like he would have stayed on G.I. Joe forever, but they pushed him onto other opportunities.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to hire this Jose Banks guy, and you're going to build Hasbro Direct because you had some success with Cobra Commander, Major Blood, and the Manta.
Right.
And then after a couple of years of that, it's like, okay, that's running itself. We'll let some other people do it. Now we need you on Play School Baby. Right. Like, they were moving Kirk. He never would have left G.I. Joe.
No. Yeah. And I don't think it's like that on every brand. But G.I. Joe, during the period that I was there, was the largest brand Hasbro had. When you got there, you didn't really want to go.
Did it feel like a promotion?
It did. It very much did. And I was grateful for the opportunity to be on it, and grateful to, the collective team for, working with me on different ideas that we came up with. And we did have a lot of success, but there was no getting around the fact that the show wasn't going to be on anymore.
G.I. Joe continues after these messages.
A real American hero.
That's a real deficit to begin with, but we found ways to get around it for at least a few years.
Right.
And that's just sheer will and ingenuity and design and product.
G.I. Joe!
They strike like lightning across the globe. A Cobra force more powerful than ever before.
We'll review in detail, all those products and how you guys managed to stay relevant without any media to pull in new fans. So I just wanted to quickly go through the different brand evolutions. 12-inch evolved into Adventure Team. That went away because of the OPEC oil embargo. They tried an 8-inch experiment with Super Joe, and then we went dark for a couple years. And then the birth of a real American hero. Bob Prupus was pushing for this for several years. He finally got the momentum that he needed. The deal with Marvel to make the comic was what finally got management to buy in. These are just early comps. Rushing and getting ready for Toy Fair. There's early Ron Rudat. Snake Eyes with a mustache and an open face mask. Mandola Artist is who Ed Morrill reached out to. He got Hector Garrido. That obviously was a huge piece of the puzzle to figure out how you'd make a real American hero compelling. So there you got Ron Rudat on the left and Garrido on the right. Snow Serpent, Ron Rudat's brilliant work. George Woodbridge on the presentation art. Ron developed the whole process of developing action figures because Hasbro did not have that in place before 1981. Right. Larry Hama created the characters, turned them into people. This was the Toy Fair 1982 catalog. The one reason I wanted to show this was all those vehicle packages are marker comps. They didn't even have them ready. You see the jump in the back left corner, and then there's a close-up of the marker comp for the jump. So they were literally building the plane in the air with Marvel licensing and selling product that didn't really exist yet.
And this is how it is all the time with everything.
That's what I was going to circle around to. So these marker comps that you guys were having to make for Toy Fair, I've found proof of them all the way up through 88 with the Warthog. When you were there from 90 to 94, were you guys still having to do marker comps for Toy Fair catalogs and just building at a breakneck pace?
No, we stopped showing packaging because it had been established.
Yep.
And unless it was in production, we just didn't go through the effort of showing it.
I think that's why the latest one I found was that 88 Warthogs. There's Prupus. He was obviously the pitch man. They made brilliant packaging with tons of call-outs. 86, they revised the brand with the three-dimensional logo and the digital stripes. They also started doing a campaign each year that would tie the whole thing together. I wanted to show this for Doug Hart because this is his entry into the brand where they finally started to transition to internal illustrators. So Doug Hart jumped in and tried to match Hector Garrido at first, right? You guys wanted a seamless continuity between the painters. There's me meeting Doug at HasCon, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So this is it. This is where you come in. By 1989, the brand was selling like half of what they were selling in 86.
Yeah.
You were brought onto their prize property, the crown jewel, as you said, but it was doing half what it was doing just a few short years prior. And we know that's due to competition because the boys' toys marketplace continued to rise.
There was a lot of factors that affected G.I. Joe. Competition was probably number one. But number two was product was different. So G.I. Joe continued to make its product basically as kind of these big model kits that there was a lot of consumer assembly.
Assembly required was a value add to me, but I realized toys went beyond that. They stopped.
They did. And the consumer changed too. But rather than being like an event to make a product, it was now like how quick can I get into it?
And have fun.
I remember when Kenner came out with the RoboCop line and I pulled that RoboCop car out of the package. It was all built, and it was all chrome. Half of it was chrome, the rest of it was white, but it was beautiful. And I realized we can't do that. We make a lot of this stuff domestically, so trying to do vac metallization and paint, really difficult to do with all those safety standards.
I think most people don't realize this. The vehicles were still manufactured and assembled in the United States and boxed and packaged and everything.
Almost all of it. The figures were made offshore,
right?
But the vehicles were made all in the factories that surrounded us in Rhode Island.
I think most people don't know that.
No, and I went to one of the factories and there'd be a room and you go in there and you'd go through what was supposed to be final production, and if there was any deviations to it, you had to identify them there and how long you were going to accept them. Because, not everything's perfect when it gets started. But I remember we had to build it. We had to make sure it worked the way that we intended to, to make it work. I came in at the tail end of these particular vehicles. It's still great product, but in the context of all the other things that had electronic lights in them and motors at the same price, it got to be, a factor.
Yeah. So Kirk came on as vice president of Boys Toys, coming back over from Play School Baby. He brought you off of Transformers and wrestling to G.I. Joe, and you guys immediately did that market research.
Yeah.
Right? And sized up the competition and realized you were falling behind, we'll say, in some areas. Spring-loaded launchers. Yeah. This is 1990. The 1990 vehicles were already developed, and you guys added them after the fact.
Right.
You can tell they're add-ons.
Yeah.
Right?
G.I. Joe now!
The G.I. Joe Avalanche will crush the Cobra Base. Cobra Hurricane will stop you.
The vertical takeoff Hurricane has deadly missiles that really fire.
Fire!
But the G.I. Joe Avalanche has ice mines that really shoot.
Fire!
Missiles!
Fire!
And it detachable attack pod.
A real American hero! Get G.I. Joe tough!
G.I. Joe Avalanche comes with driver. You put it together. Cobra, Hurricane, and other figures sold separately.
So you did the market research. Kirk was able to lobby successfully, finally, for the first time, for G.I. Joe to be able to actually have shooting weapons.
Right.
Do you recall those conversations with upper management? Were you involved in those?
Very much so.
Okay, what was that
Very
like?
much so. You know, when Stephen Hassenfeld was alive, he had a certain view of what G.I. Joe should be. And miss a launching of any kind on any toy, he just felt that that wasn't appropriate at that time. And when he passed away and his brother Alan became the CEO, times had changed and competition had changed. And
all the competition was shooting.
yeah, and Alan was reasonable. Especially when we acquired Kenner, Parker, Tonka, and Kenner was already doing spring-loaded missile launchers on Batman and Robocop.
They all came together.
Yeah, when that happened, that was another impetus for us to be able to, you know.
You can't have one division with spring-loaded launchers and the others being like, no, we can't do that.
So that's a combination of factors that happened. What I give a lot of credit to the design team on is those guys are never satisfied with just doing something like they did it the year before.
Right.
So yeah, we did missile launchers and disc launchers in this first year, right? And they were good, and that kind of put us on par. But for the design team, it isn't good enough to be on par. So they came up with lots of different ways to shoot and hurl projectiles, even down to the figure level, but especially in the vehicles. You know, we did the War Wagon, which had this enormous Gatling gun. Nobody had done. Oh, Battle Wagon. Yeah. That device was an invention that I think we even got patented.
Rolling into action, it's the battery-powered G.I. Joe Battle Wagon with motorized four-wheel drive.
Yeah, I got a bad feeling about this.
The Battle Wagon's motorized gun shoots 8 rapid-fire missiles.
And then you made something very similar the next year for the headquarters.
Yes, exactly, because we needed something big.
Towering over Cobra, it's the awesome G.I. Joe headquarters. So massive it holds over 50 Joe figures with searchlight, 3 missile launchers, 8 electronic sounds, and removable rapid-fire gun.
And then we did the Earthquake, which was great because we had what was basically a ballpoint pen, and you dropped it, and then it made it shoot. That was fantastic. No one else was doing that kind of stuff.
It's the Cobra Earthquake, blasting Joes with 3 drop-and-fire missiles. The Earthquake crushes everything in its path.
And then you come up with some clever marketing language for it to put on the front of the box.
And honestly, a lot of those terms came from design. You know, it's not like the marketing team came up with all that. We all collaborated on everything.
What's interesting to me with the vehicles is and I've heard this from the R&D team, the designers that did vehicles like Guy Cassidy, was that they would write the blueprints, right? They'd write the instructions and the blueprints. So they would come up with some naming, and then whoever was doing the packaging, I assumed marketing, would come up with more layman's explanations for it. It felt like the box itself was written for a 5 to 10-year-old, whereas the blueprints, kind of similar to the comic book, was written for a more sophisticated audience. I thought that was really cool because like Guy Cassidy was a car guy, so he would describe the level of the engine down to very specific details, or the weaponry was down to a certain millimeter, whereas on the box itself it would just say cannon, right? Where in the blueprint it was like 80 millimeter.
Before I had moved on to G.I. Joe, there was, you know, a meeting that was going on where my director at the time was trying to explain to management why tooling was increasing in price. And it was because, like anything, costs go up over time.
Sure.
But also the level of detail went up, right? So if you look at the original vehicles that they came up with, yeah, there's a fair amount of detail in it. But then you look at this kind of stuff that's here in afters, there is a lot of molded in detail. Now, molded in detail, you would think, is for free, right? You just put 2 molds together. But there's a lot of detail, and it costs more to etch and cut those in. So we didn't back off of it, but we were definitely more cognizant of it and didn't put it everywhere, put it where it needed to be. I mean, that shuttle complex has so much detail to it. It really well thought through, and that just translated into how they looked at these vehicles. Everybody who worked on the design, for the most part, worked on it as if they were working on the real vehicle, as if it could exist in real space, and didn't let up. And that, I think, is what benefited G.I. Joe for so long.
Absolutely.
You know, because most of these things are invented.
Right.
You know, there's nothing that's really kind of a replica.
They're from scratch.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's inspiration, like the NASA X-29 inspired
Yeah.
guys X-30 or whatever, but you've always got to take it in a new direction because none of your stuff was licensed by those companies to replicate their vehicle, right? Like Hasbro actually finally just licensed the F-14.
Exactly.
You guys didn't do that back in the day.
No, because
nor did you want to.
We didn't want to because this was a special branch of the military that did its own stuff.
G.I. Joe, America's top secret mobile strike force team. The mission, to defend freedom. The threat, Cobra, an evil organization bent on world conquest. The battle cry, Yo, Joe! Got to get tough. Yo, Joe! Got to get tough. Yo, Joe! Yo, Joe!
Kirk called this article Turning the Tide. So you were one of the key players that he brought in to help him turn the tide. And one of the things you guys immediately did was create this cartoon with Deke.
Yes.
Were you involved in the deal that was made with Deke?
Not the financial deal, but I was involved in, the selection of it and saw their pitch. And, we hadn't had a show for at least a season, if not more than that.
3 years.
Yeah. And so creating this, things had changed. To get it on air, you couldn't do the show you did before.
Because of the violence?
Because of the violence.
It had to be softer?
And it had to be softer, and it had to have more humor in it.
Wow.
That's why when we developed Overkill, it was meant to be Cobra's version of the Terminator.
Right.
Okay? Which is not a funny person.
No.
Okay? But they used him as the comedic foil, if you will.
Back to the Bolt Factory, Overkill.
Fall back, Overkill! It's a trap!
Now he tells me.
Speak up, you idiot! I can't hear you! I'm having you reconstructed as a vacuum cleaner!
It bugged us.
Yeah.
But, you want the thing to be on TV.
Yeah, you realize the sacrifices you have to make when you're talking to that audience.
Not just the audience, but the broadcasters and what was required in order to put things.
Who was making these rules? When you say are we talking CBS, NBC?
No, we're talking about the FTC.
So we're talking about federal regulators that are keeping an eye on this stuff.
That whole movement to label cartoon shows as just extended TV commercials for toys. That resulted in changes to what you could and couldn't have in there. That was changed.
So we won't make this a political discussion, but we can say that the political shifts in United States culture affect things all the way down to how you make toys and how you market toys.
Oh, it's a constant shifting set of sands about the values. I mean, you think about, how did G.I. Joe get resurrected from the 8-inch scale to the 3 3/4 inch scale, right? It was for two things. The first was Star Wars came out at a different scale that had been done before. And the second part of that was that America won the Olympic hockey team.
The Miracle on Ice.
And America was an underdog and could, beat all odds.
7 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. Do you believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Those two things is what gave everybody the confidence that we could relaunch a military action figure line with a nondescript, bad guy in there.
He'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
Always captured our attack cannon. Call it G.I. Joe. Go get Breaker. He can do it.
He never gives up. He'll stay till the fight's won.
Get the rapid fire motorcycle.
G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe.
Ow! He did it. You've not seen the last of Cobra.
G.I. Joe and Cobra the Enemy, each sold separately from Hasbro.
The movie came out in 87. You guys didn't have a cartoon for 88, 89, and then the miniseries came out late 89, I believe.
Yo, Joe!
It used the original G.I. Joe theme song, Do you remember the decision to make it International Heroes?
G.I. Joe! International Heroes! G.I. Joe is there!
It was because of the fact that we were trying to be global. There was, patriotism was not as high as it was back in the early 80s.
G.I. Joe! International Heroes! G.I. Joe is there!
G.I. Joe is the code name for an international, highly trained special mission force. Its purpose, to defend human freedom against a ruthless terrorist organization determined to rule the world.
They never give up, they'll stay till the fight's won. G.I. Joe will dare.
G.I. Joe! International Heroes! G.I. Joe!
Well, it's interesting, the kind of the brand promise, the real American hero. Y'all kept that through 94.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was some debate as to whether or not you should outgrow that.
Well, we talked about, in a lot of ways, reinventing G.I. Joe. There was a concern about the military angle of it, but there was also a concern about the terrorist, because now it was much more common to have terrorist organizations in the news, and we didn't have that. Back in, I mean, there had been some before, but it wasn't as prevalent as was. And we had talked about doing, do we go back to doing something like the Adventure Team and something that's more generic? But we never really got there. I mean, the only chance we had was to try to imagine it with Sergeant Savage.
From out of the past to save the day comes Sergeant Savage, the Army's toughest soldier.
But I think the execution of the figures was poor, and the storyline really never was able to get out there. And by that time, Kenner had already become part of it, and they were on a huge roll, and the decision was to give it to them, but they fared no better with it.
G.I. Joe Extreme!
Extreme new heroes, extreme new villains, extreme new firepower.
Slam, slam, slam! G.I. Joe Extreme!
Extreme times call for extreme heroes. Figures and vehicles sold separately.
Slam!
No, G.I. Joe Extreme was a pretty tremendous failure.
Terrible.
What role were they on that compelled leadership to put them in charge of G.I. Joe?
So G.I. Joe struggled, to be $100 million, right?
Sure.
Batman was $500 million.
Okay.
That's why.
But Batman had Batman the movie from 1989.
Yeah, and had the TV show. And we weren't the licensor.
Oh, and they had Batman the Animated Series by that point.
And that never ended. That just went on and on and on and on.
That show was amazing.
Yeah.
So they rode the coattails of Batman, or they rode on Batman's cake.
And before that, they did a run with Terminator and Aliens, trying to take R-rated movies and making them more kid-friendly. But those had theatricals, but they were R-rated.
Right.
But there was a trickle-down theory that younger brothers, would want to see what the older brothers were watching, and that would how it was connected with that.
And we'd seen that with like Rambo and Chuck Norris didn't have any movies that weren't rated R as far as I know. So they were taking more mature content and making it.
And then there was an attempt in Batman to branch off beyond that with Superman first, and then with Justice League.
Right.
The Superman show was nowhere near as popular as the Batman show was.
So mainly Batman was their huge hit.
Yeah.
Okay. So the theme for 1990 was Get Tough. That probably came from the advertising agency, Griffin Bacall.
Yep.
And that was everywhere throughout 1990. So you got the cartoon, which came out with a theme song.
Got to get tough, yo, Joe. Got to get tough, yo, Joe.
That was the full season 1, 1990, after the success of the miniseries. And you got a full season 2 in 91. Sky Patrol, you can speak to using what you already have, minimal new investments in creating something new. When I got Sky Patrol, I was still in the toy collecting game at this point.
Yeah.
I thought they were all new figures. I was 10, 11 years old at this point. You guys tricked me with the vehicle driver bodies and the new head sculpts and the new decos, obviously, that made them feel seamless.
They were always affectionately known as Frankensteins. The whole idea was speed and not so much investment. It was really with speed. How fast can we do this?
So it wasn't about cutting mold cutting costs.
We always looked at that, but that was more when we came to vehicles because that was a much higher tooling bill. When it came to figures, part of it was timing, and the other part of it was, does the design fit with what we're trying to do?
No one else shines! Sky Patrol! Sky Patrol is G.I. Joe!
Sky Patrol figures come with parachute. Vehicles sold separately.
Joe!
Sergeant Slaughter's Marauders, those were just clear repaints of original figures, no surprise there. But the vehicles recombined elements of different vehicles and then added little connective tissue. And it was like a whole new vehicle.
The idea was to reuse tooling and doing these different segments because it had worked with Tiger Force. But Tiger Force by far was the one that worked the best.
And then those are just straight up repaints.
Yeah. The cool thing about Tiger Force was the fact that those vehicles were not made in the U.S. Those were made in, I think it was Brazil.
Yeah.
Where they could paint.
And Python Patrol.
And Python Patrol. Then after that, they were done in America again.
Why was Python Patrol and Tiger Force produced in South America?
Because there's a cycle of where the tools go after they're done in the U.S. If we were making the product in the U.S. and then that product ended up getting dropped or discontinued, then within Hasbro's network, they would shuffle those molds off to another country that was going to use them, and that's how that got down there.
Right. So basically, United States life cycle for a product 2 to 3 years, and then it's off the shelves.
Yeah.
You guys circulate the models to your international partners. They re-release it, sometimes with different paint jobs, different stories, and it's like printing money all over again with the same molds. Unfortunately, a lot of the molds never made it back from those journeys overseas.
The tooling in and of itself is not forever.
Right.
So every time you run it, you're wearing it out.
You have to clean it and maintain it too, right?
And even if you clean it and maintain it, after a while, it's run as many shots as it's going to run.
Yep.
And you have to make the call of, do you just retire it or do you invest in replacing the whole thing?
Yep.
And so eventually those things just kind of wear themselves out.
And us collectors that are savvy with the international releases can track the global footprint of these pieces.
India was usually the last place it went.
The last stop for the Sky Striker was in India, for example. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that one. Okay, so there was a rebrand for 1990. This is something I wanted to touch on. By this point, the packaging company, Coleman, LaPuma, Siegel, and Morrill, Ed Morrill worked with Hasbro from 1969 to 1989. They basically phased them out in the late 80s. So this was internal, I believe, just Matt Lysak and his graphic design team that worked on the rebrand for 1990. Did you work on this rebrand?
No, this was already in the works when I got there.
Okay. I wanted to talk about the promotions each year, where these ideas came from, whose concepts were they. Do you look back at those with fondness, or was this just something you had to do each quarter?
No, we always looked at, they were, an important part of both Transformers and G.I. Joe, My Little Pony.
Listen up to what I say. Listen up to what he says. Now G.I. Joe's got combat pay. G.I. Joe's got combat pay.
Now with every G.I. Joe purchase, you can collect up to $10,000 in combat pay that you can trade for fantastic prizes.
Doing these on-pack promos at the time was one of the things that set Hasbro apart from a lot of other companies. So we had a promotional department, and they would work with their internal and external contractors to develop a bunch of different concepts. And then they would present them to us in marketing. And then we would give them feedback on which ones we thought would be the most interesting to the G.I. Joe consumers. But then they would work directly with our factories on finishing the promotion and when it was going to roll in and when it was going to roll out of production. We did not have to do that.
Now collect Joe and Cobra command rings, free in special packages.
You never changed the packaging price for these, so they just had to take a little chunk out of your margin for each one.
Yeah, there was a separate budget just for promotions, and that's where the cost of the product and the cost of the promotion came from.
Gotcha.
They always presented us things that would fit within the budget that they had.
In 1990, they also added the illustrations of drivers on packaging instead of the bubble where you could see through and see the figure. And I thought this was a great move because it's much more compelling.
And it was done as a cost savings.
Instead of having to die cut that.
Die cut and have the figures come in a blister that you had to assemble in the package. The choice was, let's put it in a poly bag inside, but let's make sure that we have the illustration on there instead. It's part of the evolution of how do you maintain your margin, how do you not have to raise prices. These are some of the changes that you make.
It's interesting to hear that that was a cost-saving measure because I thought it was a value add.
Really?
To me, seeing the drivers illustrated like that was way better than seeing through a die-cut window to see the actual figure.
Well, it kept Doug busy.
Yeah, it did. Yep. And then Bob Lavoie came on as well, so he started helping him with some of these. Do you remember the Rapid Fire promotion for Walmart? What happened with that one? It was basically Super Trooper recolored.
Yeah. For so many years, we had done things for Toys R Us, right? They were the biggest customer.
Yeah.
But this is during a time where Walmart was increasing. And then we needed to do things for Walmart. And this was the kind of thing that they wanted to do. Help set them apart, gave them something that was exclusive.
So was it definitely a store exclusive?
Yeah.
Can you confirm that?
Yeah, from what I remember, we just did that for Walmart.
Okay, I thought it was. So speaking of Walmart, these are all Walmart executives. This was 1990, and it touches on exactly what you were just saying about rapid fire.
Yeah.
You needed to get ingratiated with Walmart.
They had become, a bigger factor, in the business, and we wanted to do it. I mean, the illustrations are fantastic.
Oh, they're awesome, man. I was really lucky to get 2 Kodachromes from 2 different collectors. It's crazy how these things get out there.
Oh my gosh. Sales
and packaging didn't come up with custom figures for these or
No.
anything. Okay. Because it looks like hit and run with psych outs attachments on that right side, So 1990, we talked about this a little bit. This is where late in the year, you guys got approval, did the market research, got approval for spring-loaded launchers, and then added the launchers after the fact.
Right.
So this is Doug's original painting for the Hurricane, but it doesn't have the drone that sits on top and fires the missiles.
Right.
1990 General, beautiful painting on the left. Have you ever seen the green Mobile Command Center illustration on the right?
Yes. We wanted to bring it back. It was one of those things where, can we bring this one back, redeco it, make it more traditional? And it got dropped either because not all of the tooling was available as we thought, or that the price point was going to be too high after we did costing, because this was another domestically made product.
Any recollection of what time in your tenure there from 1990 to 1994 that happened?
I remember seeing it that first year I was on it, so it was between 1990 and 1991.
Sometimes you're lucky, man.
Yeah.
I got it put in the right place.
This wasn't something that I had to make a decision on. It was kind of already a foregone conclusion we weren't going to be able to do it. I really wanted us to do this because I personally think it looks better than the tan one.
Yeah, so Guy, was the designer that took the tackle box and made it into the kind of Jawa sandcrawler. And his opinion was that vehicle made more sense in the desert because it would be open, no trees and stuff getting in the way. So he lobbied for the tan one. And then the green one obviously was painted. That signature below it in front of the cabin is Ted Giavis. He actually did a couple other paintings through Hasbro Direct for G.I. Joe products around 1986, 1987. So we weren't certain if that green painting by Ted Giavis was painted back in 86.
I don't know.
So that's the other theory as to when and why that painting was produced. But it's good to know from you that 1990, the conversation was being had about whether or not to reintroduce it.
Yeah. In the General here, we started to make components now come from Asia. So the electronic lights and sound piece that's on this came from Asia. And that was a big deal for us to now take components that were made in Asia and put them into domestic product because of what the competition was doing.
Right. All right. This is the mural puzzle that never was. This is Doug Hart's key image that he painted of all the 1990 products. He spent 2 months on it. He did it nights and weekends. This was a side hustle. You guys weren't able to use it, evidently. I mean, Milton Bradley was a subsidiary of Hasbro, so I don't understand why you wouldn't be able to use it. But Doug didn't think you'd be able to use it. And instead, on the 1990 catalog, it's just that diagonal bevel logo. And that, to me, as an art kid, I'm like, where's the art going?
Yeah.
I was dumbfounded. When I saw this, I was like, that should have been the catalog for 1990.
Yeah.
But do you remember ever seeing this when you came on?
No.
No, never saw it. I think he painted it nights and weekends, and it went away to Milton Bradley. It was released overseas as 4 puzzle sets, and then was eventually released in '92 as a Greek candle box. So just a little bit of trivia there. All right, 1991. Here's your boy. So you came on the brand. I've heard this story, but I'd like you to tell it on camera. I went to the Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. It's a beautiful museum, and the whole second floor is the history of toys. I recommend going if you haven't been. And they had a section dedicated to the earth-friendly toys of the early 90s. And they have you guys in there, Eco Warriors, alongside Captain Planet.
Right.
I think this was a good idea, and I like that G.I. Joe was playing in that territory that was very relevant at the time.
Yeah.
You took some flack for it, I guess, from the design team.
Yeah, I came up with this strategy that if we're going to continue to see this growth in different action figure brands, if you really boiled them down, they all had some military aspect to it, okay? Even Ninja Turtles are Ninja Turtles, which is a military branch of Japanese armies. So if we're going to compete against this, then we're going to thwart all the new brands with our version of it because we own military, all aspects of it.
So the Joes unleash Ninja Force with real ninja action. There's Storm Shadow, Nunchuk, and Shebang. But Cobra's got Slice and Dice. Joe and Cobra Ninja Force, Battlecopters, and Air Commandos, sold separately. Cobra's finished.
No, we've only just begun.
So when we started to see things like Captain Planet, and there was another one, we were like, okay, there's another one we have to compete in, right? And at the same time, this was part of the research that we did about how to make G.I. Joe more relevant, right? That's where the DEF came from. Eco Warriors came from that same study. Like, we have to be able to branch out into these other things. The design team wanted to be purists. So we would have never changed anything other than spring-loaded missile launchers, had they really had their way. I mean, they were happy to do Night Force, they're happy to do, but when it came to doing Eco Warriors or DEF or even Ninja Force, that was a struggle for them because they felt like we were getting away from our core. But the way I looked at it was we needed to get to $100 million, right? So one of the ways to get to $100 million is to advertise each of these segments as if it's new, and get people excited about it that don't just write it off as G.I. Joe, who had been around the longest. There wasn't any Star Wars anymore.
Transformers went away. Star Wars went away. The big brands.
G.I. Joe was the oldest one at that point in time. And it looked the same. I will never say it looked old. It looked the same.
Sure.
And it needed to be more relevant.
Right.
So if the design team loves you, they will make you a bad guy. And so I got named as Cesspool. I didn't get a choice on picking the name, nothing. The whole group of the design team was around, like they all gathered for this.
Yeah.
And we were going through figures and they showed me this and I'm just shaking my head like this. But it was funny. And I was honored to be, part of it. And then that translated further when we went to go do the commercial shoot. You had to gang up all the spots in one commercial shoot that lasted 3 weeks.
Still using the same studio in Vancouver?
Yeah, it's the same one, but different director. And so the agency comes to me and says, we have a surprise for you. And then they stuck me in a makeup chair for a couple hours to do this thing on my face and my eye and colored my hair white. And they're like, we have a spot for you. So we built a rig. It was at least 2 stories tall that looked like the Eco Warriors.
Like the Toxo Lab?
Toxo Lab. So there was a turret on the top. They built one out of a Volkswagen bucket seat and something that made it look like a gun barrel. And they put me on that. It was on a rotating platform. And they had to give me some pills to keep me from having to go to the bathroom.
Oh, wow.
And I was up there for 6 hours, spinning around. And then it would stop, and then it would spin around. Every time we did a take, it would spin around, right? That was to keep me out of the way, because my job on the commercial shoot was to look at every shot. And they hated it because, some other people don't make as many comments. I made a fair amount of comments. Yeah. So they stuck me up there. Yeah. And the insult to injury is that after all that time, when we got to the final cut, it was cut out of the commercial.
They never even added you to the spot.
It was because they had to get the spot down to a certain size.
G.I. Joe! The fight to save the environment continues with all new Joe and Cobra Eco Warriors. They've got awesome water guns and color change battle damage. And here comes the G.I. Joe Eco Striker with Cobra Slam water cannon. Take a bath, Cobra. Toxo Lab, Eco Striker, and Eco Warrior sold separately.
That's crazy.
It was funny.
I wonder if they intended to have you in the spot from the start, if it was a ploy to get rid of
It could have been. It could have been. We all got along really well. Sure. And they were a great agency, and the account managers were great. And
was Kirk on that shoot with you in 91?
No, he did the one before.
He gave me the tape that he shot with the handy cam. And it was like 4 tapes worth of. He shot a lot of footage.
Oh yeah, because it's the first time we had done a truly live action campaign. We had done the one before, the Super Trooper, but this was completely different. It was really almost to the scale of filming a TV show or a movie.
It was a micro movie.
It was.
You could tell that on set was like a jovial vibe. Everybody was having fun.
It was a tremendous amount of fun.
Cobra won't be satisfied until they rule the world. Can they be stopped? It's up to G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe.
You came on in 1990. There was only one sub-brand in 1990. That was Sky Patrol, and obviously you were able to throw that together quickly just by molding some heads.
That was already done before I got there, so I just saw the finish of that.
So 1991, technically late 1990, Sonic Fighters drops.
Right.
Giant backpacks, sound effects. And then later in 1991, Eco Warriors drops. 1992, DEF, Eco Warriors Year 2, Electronic Supersonic Fighters, which was the next iteration of Sonic Fighters, Ninja Force, and Talking Battle Commanders. 5 different sublines. Yeah. Can you talk about why you guys ramped up all the sublines and how did you roll them out? My theory was that they started to come out quarterly.
So what happened was, when Kirk came back into G.I. Joe, he wanted us to start to work on toys that actually did things. So Sonic Fighters was the first one, right? And we had never done electronics on a figure before. But there were competitors that had done it. So we put that together. That was part of the campaign. The reason there's 2 waves of most of these things is because we did it on a quarterly basis, and you wanted to see it last a whole year. Once you carve out the space at retail, you want to be able to replace yourself, not have to mark it down and then create something that's totally brand new in that.
Right.
We wanted to do more expensive figures too, because G.I. Joe always struggled to get above $1.99. Believe it or not, $1.99 was a big deal back at that day. And we had seen the competition, especially Kenner, getting $4.99 or $5.99 even for action figures that, had features in them, but, didn't have electronics or whatever else. G.I. Joe was really a vehicle line. That's where the volume was. That's where a lot of the attention was made, is on vehicles. Figures were looked at as cannon fodder. And we had 3 different assortments, that we would put the figures in and wave those figures throughout the year.
Right.
But that was done to have $1.99 price point, something that had put on the vehicles and be able to battle against. But it was never the driving thing until we started to do deluxe figures with electronics. Then they became a lot more important to us.
And is that just because the margins got better on the figures, so you were starting to make your bread and butter?
It's because you could really advertise, a feature-driven deluxe figure.
Get G.I. Joe down!
Listen up! G.I. Joe never sounded like this before.
Sonic Fighters!
Only G.I. Joe Sonic Fighters come with an electronic backpack with 4 different combat sounds, like laser rifles and machine guns.
Dial tone, behind you! Tunnel Rat, cover me!
A real American hero! Get G.I. Joe down!
Sonic Fighters come with electronic backpack and 4 different combat sounds.
It was an exciting time. It was meant to be, we would have newness. We tried to have something new every quarter.
The way we organize it on the archives, first Joe and now me, and also Mark Palomo with his book, is just by annual. And that's not accurate for the 90s.
Yeah.
Like what we really should do is like quarterly.
If we lined up which things happened in which year, I can probably tell you which quarter they came out in.
I'll shoot you an email with some of that information. So I wanted to share all these promotions with you. So there was the little magnets.
Love those things.
So instead of combat pay, you had these combat pay coupons, right?
Yeah.
So that was the next iteration of that. Do you remember Red Star, how he came out as a bad guy first at Cobra, and then he had a blue sticker placed on it, adding G.I. Joe, and then they revised the card front to show him?
If I remember correctly, it had to do with, he was in the comic book as part of October Guard.
Right.
It was not necessarily a friend of G.I. Joe's.
Right.
So it was looked at almost as a, if not a friend, then it must be an enemy.
Right.
And then they corrected that. And it could have been just easily just a mistake. That they used the red card, because sometimes that happens too.
Well, it was the red card, but it was also the Cobra logo on his file card, right? So I think it was a conscious decision, like at first he's a bad guy, and then no, let's make a running change and switch him to a good guy.
This was a controversial thing that when it happened.
So yeah, I wanted to talk about Kurt Groen a little bit, because he was your key figure designer from 1990 to 1994. You had a little bit of Ron Rudat mixed in there. I apologize, but there's one other guy that developed a lot of the 1990s.
Dave DeForge.
I don't think I did an artist profile for him.
Yeah.
Did you work with Dave?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about Dave, a little bit about Kurt.
Kurt was there first and did some really nice work, especially like something like this. He brought some really cool ideas about accessories and things like that that we really hadn't done before and kind of pushed it. Dave DeForge was much more of an illustrator, and he had come to us from packaging. It took him a little while. He hadn't done this kind of thing before. Developing illustrations for packaging and then developing illustrations for action figure product are very different, and he needed to learn that. And Kurt's part of his job was to get Dave trained, and so was Dave Kunitz's job to get Dave trained and to be able to do that. They both did well with executing. We made a lot of their figures.
Kurt Groen was there pretty much the whole time you were there. Do you remember the advent of the Air Commandos?
Oh, yeah.
Gliders? Where did those come from? Did someone bring it in?
Yeah, it was an inventor concept.
Okay.
We started to look at more inventor concepts for G.I. Joe because everything else was fairly, insular, and we needed to really, spread out.
You were still making model kits of vehicles, basically.
Well,
this took you away from that.
Yeah, and it started to push us where everything did something.
Right.
And so this was the whole idea of, being able to actually have a G.I. Joe figure fly.
You're all washed up, Cobra!
I must have the plasma tox.
The battle for the Plasmatox takes to the skies with Joe and Cobra Air Commandos, soaring gliders that can fly up to 30 feet.
I've got the plasma tox! Cobra!
You did 4 of those in the first year and 2 of those in the second year. This is one of those rare instances where you don't feature any card art at all, except on the file card. And then there's what looked like might have been presentation artwork used for these guys. You can see it all on the right-hand side over there. Do you remember any of that artwork being created or showed as presentation artwork?
I sort of remember this one and this one and this one and this one being presentation.
So do you remember seeing full body artwork for those then?
Yeah.
As presentations? Yeah. Man, I wish we could track those down. All right, so here's your boys. Now, you said you came up with a concept, and I get that you were inspired by other environmentally conscious brands of the day.
Here's the thing. Vinnie did not pick Eco Warriors.
Okay. We've got to set the record straight.
We just looked at what the competition was, right? And then Kirk and myself, and the head of R&D, Steve DeGuano, and the head of design, which was Greg Bernstein.
Yeah.
We talked about the strategy of thwarting all these different ones. Right. And at the time, the planet was a big deal. And one of the things the PR agency had told us was like, you got to be relevant. Right. So being involved in the environment was really important. And then when we did the partnership for Drug Free America, those were initiatives that came from our PR group that Kirk and I then said, okay, this could be the beginnings of doing, a different segment.
So that wouldn't have been Griffin Bacall.
No.
That's a different. Is that an internal organization? This PR group?
No, external.
Ah, okay.
So and we would look at stuff like all the time. It wasn't like some one person did it. I think that some, not all, of the design team didn't want to do it because it didn't feel like G.I. Joe, and the whole goal was to make it feel like G.I. Joe.
If they just wanted to stick with military traditional, they just would have kept riding that bell curve down, right?
Yeah.
If they just kept doing the same thing, we would have been done in a couple more years.
That's right, because you can't turn a blind eye to what the competition is doing.
Right.
You may not like what they're doing, but you have to compete.
If that's what's selling, you need to take a piece of that pie.
And you need to figure out how to not lose yourself.
Yeah.
When they got into this, there was a lot of thought that was really put into it. I mean, they had a story. This guy, he's the head of this group from Cobra. He used to be in logging. He was a lumberjack. He fell off and landed someplace where his face got cut, and like the Joker, was in some kind of chemical thing, and it changed his hair white. So he's got a chainsaw because he used to be a lumberjack. He's got these spikes on his heels because he's a lumberjack.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's all Kurt Groen coming up with all of that.
So he would have done that backstory.
He did.
As opposed to waiting for Larry.
He pitched it to me.
Okay.
We had a lot of fun with this because we'd never used color change. And that was another factor. How do you use color change, which was very, very popular in Hot Wheels at the time. It had just been introduced. How do you use color change in G.I. Joe?
To pollute the environment, Cobra unleashes the Septic Tank and evil Eco Warriors. The Septic Tank and Eco Warriors have powerful water guns, and when hit, they change color to reveal battle damage.
My suit's corroding! Clean them up!
Inventor concepts are coming in constantly, right? So somebody pitches us on, using color change ink, and here's the cost, and you can apply it to figures, and how would you use that? Separately, we're working on this segmentation plan.
Right.
And we identify the Captain Planet is doing really well. And so how do we compete against that? One day we just said, well, maybe we can just combine these two and do the color change with Eco Wars. And that was not me. That was somebody from design doing it. It could have even been Steve DeGuano that pushed that. Steve was a big proponent and supporter of pushing the envelope of what the G.I. Joe brand needed to evolve into. So he brought us a lot of, inventors. He brought a lot of his own, well, don't say no. We could do this, and that started to open people's minds up. These were all successful. Right. If they weren't, then we wouldn't have done them anymore.
Right. I mean, Eco Warriors made it to year 2, and it almost made it to year 3. Yeah. So clearly, it was not a losing concept.
Yeah. We did the Toxo Viper, and then the Toxo Zombie.
Love Toxo
It was
Zombie.
just fun.
It is fun. And it's a kid's toy.
I don't know who's saying it was Vinnie's idea, but everybody had a good time and they got into it.
This is how yarns are woven, right?
Okay.
We've already spoken to this quite a bit, but I wanted to show that slide. That speaks to this kind of quarterly rollout of a new storyline, of a new subline.
At one point in time, I had a flight jacket, but it was in black.
Did you get patches made of all these?
I had patches of almost all of those going down the sleeve. It looks good on a commercial shoot. You can't walk that around in public with that stuff.
Was all this branding done by Matt Lyzak's internal department by this point?
Yeah. It started with Sonic Fighters, and then that started to evolve, from there.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this is just a fun concept. I've talked with Kirk about this ad nauseum. What's your take on Dino Hunters?
This was mine. Okay. Jurassic Park's going to come out.
Right.
And I'm like, I'll be if we're not going to do something to thwart that one too. Mm-hmm. So we came up with this idea to do just a set, just one item. And it was supposed to go to KB Toys.
Okay, it was going to be exclusive.
We put together a vehicle. We put together 2 redecoed figures. Mm-hmm. We came up with a storyline behind this dinosaur. And then we had every intention of using an existing dinosaur. We did all the work, did all the costing. We presented it to KB, and they thought the price was too high. Mm-hmm. And they passed.
Okay.
So I said, we're going to go to Toys R Us with it. So we go to Toys R Us with it. Dave Brewy was the buyer at the time, and he liked it, and he said, yeah, I'll take it. Nice. Okay, you think it's done, right? No. So one of the things that's very difficult for a lot of toy companies to do is to take existing product from somebody else and stick it in their product, because it all has to pass all the federal standards and that toy company's own standards, right? Okay. And so this dinosaur, this existing dinosaur we have, for some reason, did not pass our standards. So we decided that we were going to use a different dinosaur, but the packaging had already been shot.
Okay.
And I didn't want to redo the packaging because we already had released it. And on the back of the package, it says product and colors may vary. And I'm like, that covers it. It's still an upright dinosaur. Yeah, it doesn't look exactly the same, but nobody's going to really care, right? Well, that was not the answer. So they pulled me into the principal's office. And so I have to explain myself, right? So Al's there and he goes, listen, I know where you're coming from. But we just got done signing an agreement about false advertising on 2 other products. And we're not going to do it a third time. So either change the dinosaur or change the package.
Right.
Which was going to get us delayed. And I wanted this to come out when the movie came out, right? Which is summer. I bit my lip and we had to change the packaging.
You shot the packaging again.
So we had to do that. We shipped it. Yeah. It did okay, right? It wasn't never meant to last more than a year.
Sure.
But it came out.
So this dinosaur, I think his arms are like connected to his body.
Yes, that was one of the issues, was the arms were too thin. We ended up having to tool a dinosaur that was very similar to the one we wanted to buy, except the little spindly arms were molded to the body.
You had to attach them to the body. That's fascinating. You actually ended up having to tool one after all that.
Ridiculous.
Makes no sense.
Ridiculous. Yeah. Because somehow it didn't pass a pull test or something like that.
So here we are with the photo reference for you and Kirk down there, bottom right corner.
Oh, God. Where did you get that picture?
Yeah, I got it from Doug.
Oh,
so tell me about the experience of sitting with Doug in the photo studio.
It wasn't for very long. He already had an idea of like the angle of what he was going to illustrate. So he just needed me to get into that and, to make a mean face because I was a bad guy.
Right.
So it didn't take very long, but that is definitely the face.
No, it's an awesome face, man. Do you remember the electronic battle gear set that you made?
Yes.
This was the first one. 1991 was Duke. 1992 was Snake Eyes.
Yeah. Hardest thing to cost out.
Really?
Yeah, because it was all domestically made. And so trying to do a helmet, which is a big cube, and doing an electronic gun when you're making everything domestically, it's a difficult thing.
Why were you still domestic for these at this point?
Because everything was. We really weren't focused on doing anything but figures until 1995.
Okay.
And that was the first time we were going to make vehicles in China. Hasbro was one of the last companies to hold on to domestic manufacturing.
Well, God bless them for trying.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure the cost pressures were just too intense, and they eventually had to.
It is.
So this product, did not come out as a G.I. Joe product, but it was shown as a G.I. Joe product in the catalog, right?
Yeah.
So this was coming soon as an electronic survivor shot in the G.I. Joe catalog. It ended up coming out as its own product.
Yeah, that was from a Japanese company, and I can't remember which one. It was not Takara. Kirk really led the charge on that one. It was really cool. At one point, we did think about that we were going to make it as part of G.I. Joe, but then the decision was made that we needed to make it older.
So the Desert Apache Flying Fighters came out first, and then G.I. Joe repurposed the Apache helicopter that came out as part of the Flying Fighters line.
Yes.
Do you recall?
I remember it vividly.
Now you can be a member of a fighter pilot squadron with Flying Fighters.
Listen to him climb!
6 incredibly detailed fighters with super electronic sound.
Lock on! Fire! Got him!
Flying Fighters comes with patch and poster.
We had Flying Fighters first as jets. Year 2 was the helicopters. It did well, and then we were looking at needing a vehicle for Sonic Fighters, and we happened to have the Apache helicopter that had electronic lights and sounds in it. So all we did was modify the cockpit so you could fit a G.I. Joe figure in it, and we had a vehicle that worked with that line.
It's the incredible new G.I. Joe Sonic Apache with electronic sounds. Listen, Sonic Apache has machine gun noise and missiles that really fire. G.I. Joe Sonic Apache with electronic sound.
It was good. It was easy.
Yeah, I've shot Lieutenant Falcon in that cockpit, and let's just say he's not comfortably tucked away in there.
No, I think the illustration certainly takes some liberties with the real scale of it, but not everything in the G.I. Joe line has been to scale anyway.
Right.
You know, this was another one that was a great repurpose. A new lid on the top and a new gun for the turret. That is an awesome vehicle.
Yep.
And this I haven't seen before.
Right, so this was created for video games and computer entertainment. They did a special on the new Taxon video game. And they did not only that custom Snake Eyes cover illustration, but this 2-page spread featuring Blizzard. I believe he's blowing up some snow serpents.
Yeah.
It's a great piece of art.
Oh, it's beautiful. I don't remember seeing this at all.
And so you guys wouldn't have had to sign off on anything like this?
Normally, we would have artwork that was already pre-approved that we would use in the licensing group. But if there was articles or things like this that were written, then either the licensing group would have to get approval from somebody, but not necessarily did it have to be me.
Yeah.
So they could have gone to the design group and say, hey, can you take a look at this? What do you think?
I wonder who footed the bill for that. Did the magazine pay?
Magazine did.
Okay.
I do remember this. This was a new art style that we experimented with.
Doug Hart's talked about that. Marketing really wanted to move in a comic book style direction illustratively. Perhaps not on the packaging, but in all the surrounding.
Yeah, on some of the other things. We wanted to have sort of a greater connection to comic book styling because a lot of the things that we were seeing in competition were coming from comic books. Toy Biz and Image Comics and all those other guys.
The comic industry was never hotter than like 92, 93.
Yeah.
A #1 issue could sell 1 million copies. Valiant Comics sold Turok Dinosaur Hunter #1, Bart Sears cover, former Hasbro employee. 1 million copies of Turok Dinosaur Hunter #1. It was insane.
I remember all those special covers and foil stamping and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I remember this one here.
Yep. This came later in the year by Capcom. So you guys had 2 video games in 1 year, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
So the Taxon game came first and the Capcom game.
The Capcom game was the greatest game. I remember playing it. Love this artwork.
Yeah, so that was for the arcade game made by Konami, but I love the gameplay on that one.
Yo, Joe!
Yo, Joe! Yo, Joe! Yo, Joe!
Mission 1.
Yo, Joe!
One of my friends, Dan, actually had the stand-up arcade in his house, and we got to play it through, and it's awesome.
Really cool. And this year, I remember us doing this. We had such a great time creating a different kind of a look, a more comic book style, and we used that a lot that year. And this also harkened back to the live-action commercial because the lead guy was Duke.
Here comes G.I. Joe battle copters, zip strip copters that really fly high.
Perfect for dropping in unexpected.
Watch out, Duke. Cobra's got battle copters too.
I hate when this happens!
He was perfectly cast for that role. He was a good Duke.
He was a good dude. I'll tell you, he got his hair cut just to play that part.
Right. So Doug Hart painted that. It was using the blue line art style where you draw the line art illustration, then you transfer it in blue to another board, and then you do all the color underneath it and lay the black line art on top of it. All right, so 1992, you got Ninja Force Year 2, DEF, Eco Warriors Year 2, Electronic Supersonic Fighters, and Talking Battle Commanders. So a big year for sublines.
Yep.
So this is year 3 of the combat pay.
At this point, this is the promotion team, basically continuing to run it. The budgets weren't, super high. And so they needed to make changes to what we could offer as keeping the budget sort of whole.
So you started these collector cards. I think that's Impel.
Impel.
And you did a full set with them as well as...
That was such a big deal.
Yeah, so how'd you strike that deal?
Impel was new. And they wanted to do G.I. Joe.
Oh, they came in and pitched you guys.
Yeah, they came and pitched us. And they did a great job with them.
It looked like mainly new comic book style artwork. So I was curious, who were the illustrators? And
they hired them, so it wasn't us.
So Impel managed that whole process, creative process. Okay.
Yep, and I remember signing off on the characters, signing off on the layouts, signing off on all the copy. I mean, it was a lot.
Ninja Viper was your mail order figure that year. It was just a recolored re-release of Storm Shadow. That was still kind of the direct mail thing that Kirk had set up. Would they have decided what figures they were going to recolor and
Yeah, they would have worked with the design team and probably the junior marketing person that was on the line at the time to come up with that, and then I just would, look it over. But it was good. They did a lot with using existing figures.
So you had a direct report helping you with G.I. Joe?
Yeah, no, I had a couple of them at one point. They were all, great, really hungry, had a lot of passion for the brand, and learned along the way.
Sure.
And they learned along the way.
DEF, so we'd alluded to this before, but I wanted to show it to you with the package, because I think this part over here is equally as important as the figures themselves. You guys sent that packet out to every public school in the country?
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about DEF, where it came from, why, the PR company. And
So Partnership for Drug-Free America comes to pitch us on all of Hasbro's properties. They want to partner with us. How can we do that, right? And it was a big topic, and it was an important topic. So then we got inventor concepts that were coming in, and so we got this mechanism in which allowed you to have this electronic flashing thing every time you fired the missile launcher, right? And so we didn't know where to put it. When Partnership for Drug-Free America came in, and the promotional group really thought it was a good thing to do, and our CEO thought, if we could put something together, it would. So we decided we would make a good guy, bad guy kind of thing and create a storyline about it that ended up being animated. And it was the first time that, a G.I. Joe figure became addicted.
Hooked on drugs.
To a substance.
Why'd you do that, Lieutenant Falcon?
Cobra's attacking an air cargo shipment of diamonds. Let's scramble, Joes.
Sounds like hot action. Which means it's time for a little pick-me-up.
It was meant to be provocative.
It was.
It was meant to teach a lesson. We made it a big deal. I don't know how successful the entire program was, but I know we put a lot of effort into it, and a Partnership for Drug-Free America put a lot of push behind it.
So this is the whole year 1. The two bad guys are over on the far right side, the headhunters. There were more in development for year 2, but we didn't get those as DEF here in the States.
Yeah.
But beautiful artwork by Doug Hart here. Like he's in full stride. The crackhead guy with the bad skin tone, the crooked teeth, like he's drooling, like his fingernails.
This is Headman, the lead drug dealer, and that's one of his headhunters.
Right.
Which is one of his, nameless, faceless minions.
Who Who can stop the evil drug-pushing headhunters and their leader, Headman?
Let's take out this trash!
It's the G.I. Joe Drug Elimination Force, armed with battle flash weapons. There's Mutt, Bulletproof, Cutter, and Shockwave. They fight the evil Headman and his drug-pushing headhunters. This is the Joe's most important fight ever, because they're fighting for all of us.
Remember, real American heroes don't do drugs.
G.I. Joe Drug Elimination Force figures come with battle flash weapons, each sold separately.
So this is your Eco Warriors Year 2 offerings. When I finally knew I had a real problem with collecting, it was when I bought that stupid black dolphin for like $3,000. I was like, what am I doing? I don't love this figure $3,000 worth.
You got to stop yourself sometimes.
Well, so I did sell it. I did end up selling it, but I'm glad to have it for the book. And do you recall why you guys made that change?
Vividly.
All right. What happened with the black dolphin?
When we originally came up with this figure, which was affectionately known as either microwave head or TV head, we liked the helmet as it's illustrated, but this is a little heavy-handed and looks clunky. We needed to do a diver. We hadn't done one in a while. So we wanted to do it with a killer whale. We thought that'd be really cool, you know? So we did. We sculpted a killer whale, and we presented the presentation artwork to one of our line reviews with the executive staff, and Alan Hassenfeld is like, well, why a killer whale? Why don't you use like a dolphin? And of course, everybody in R&D rolls their eyes because nobody wants to do a dolphin.
Was that a scale issue? He wanted?
No, he just thought that a killer whale is too mean, and that a dolphin seems to be more related to scientific experiments to communicate with people. So Alan didn't really do too many edicts, but this is one where he's like, yeah, no, you need to change to a dolphin. I'm like, okay, we just want to get this done and get this out. Wow. So we sculpted it as a dolphin, but we'd already sculpted the killer whale, and all the artwork had already been sent to China. If you look at it sideways, somebody might mistake a dolphin for a killer whale, right? Sure. So somewhere along the way, the wires got crossed, and the initial samples that came in for FEP were painted to look like a killer whale. And I don't remember how many exactly got made like that. It wasn't a ton, but that's why that exists.
Gotcha. All right. So I got that from Lee's Toy Review.
Yeah.
You guys had provided a couple copies to him.
Yeah. It was just one of those things.
Yeah. All right. So this is Ninja Force. What inspired you guys to do Ninja Force?
One of the toughest things to do has always been, how do you put any mechanisms inside the G.I. Joe figure? It's so complex and it's so small. The figures that competitors were doing were not this size. They were 5 inches and sometimes 6 inches tall. And there's more room to do things in there. So this inventor came in with how to add spring-loaded mechanisms inside a G.I. Joe figure. That was the impetus to get the Tech Mech team that's part of design to expand on it. So that's what we did. And so all of these figures had different mechanical actions. You can see they're right here.
Yep.
We were able to do mechanisms inside a G.I. Joe figure and not mess up the articulation or the size of the design. But when we went to go make Armatech, which were really just meant to be figures in spacesuits.
In armor.
Right?
Yeah.
We couldn't do the articulation, and then the missile launcher had to be, totally out of scale with it. It just looked like we ran out of gas. And I think to a certain extent, we all did. Mm-hmm. I certainly let it go.
Yeah.
We had been just churning and burning to keep this line at $100 million, that it was a lot of product to do. Because you're making more product rather than driving entertainment in you can burn everything out when you're doing more and more product, because it's not going to sell at the same rate without having the content there.
Yeah, without media there to drive demand for it, you're dealing essentially with a smaller consumer customer base, and you're trying to sell them more stuff, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
And we haven't even touched on the fact that you relaunched the 12-inch line.
Yeah, which we'll get to it.
So you explained why the internal mechanism that the inventor brought in, you had to make something with that. Why did you pair it with the Ninja concept, and what was the impetus for doing the Ninja concept?
Well, it made so much sense because we had Snake Eyes in Storm Shadow, so it was already part of that. Yeah. So it was the most natural fit, I think, out of everything that we did.
And anybody that read the comics knew that Scarlet had karate training, Zartan was an Arashikage ninja.
All of it was kind of bred into the storyline and the DNA that was G.I. Joe. And this is one of the best costumes
it is.
That was designed, and Kurt did a great job with that.
Yep. Were the Ninja Turtles or Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat motivation to expand the ninja mythos?
Ninja Turtles was definitely. Mortal Kombat was not, and Street Fighter were not a factor at this point.
Okay. Talking Battle Commanders. You only did 4 of these, but it was clever. I think it was the first time you guys used voices on the electronic packs.
There's Stalker, Cobra Commander, Overkill, and General Hawk. G.I. Joe Talking Battle Commanders, each sold separately.
It was a way to expand beyond just electronic sounds to get voices in place.
Was this an internal idea or an inventor?
Yeah, this is internal.
Okay.
It was kind of just a natural progression of what do we do next. Around this same time, we had been working on an inventor concept that would have allowed every single G.I. Joe figure to speak. But you had to have it attached to basically a micro tape recorder, just to show you how old the technology is compared to now, which had a pad. And you could read the molded in code on the bottom of a G.I. Joe's foot into that.
Yeah.
And when you pressed it in, it would fast forward or rewind to a specific place where that code was matched, and it would say whatever that character was going to say. It was really a novel idea. But the problem is when we finally had it working, we brought it to a focus group, and the kids were not interested in it.
Because it took too long to get to the spot on the tape or whatever?
It's too much work, yeah. And so we ended up ditching it, you know, and that was like a year project.
Wow.
And that was gonna be a big deal because of how many millions of figures that we sold, and we would have to pay a royalty on all those.
What's that thing? Surprise! Destro thinks it's a ruined outpost, but you change it into Supersonic Fort America with 8 electronic sounds and ripple fire missiles.
Where did the Fort America come from?
That's an inventor concept. Again, domestically made, right? So we couldn't have all the painted detail that you see here, but the illustration is beautiful. And the vehicle that it turned into is not so bad. Not so bad. When it was a bombed out, thing, that was pretty cool too. I mean, this had missile firing, a different kind of missile firing, and it had electronic sounds with it as well.
I think the Desert Apache came out later than the Sonic Fighters figures, and I think the Fort America came out later than the Electronic Supersonic Fighters figures, but it's branded with it, so we're grouping it together as what you would call a segment.
Yeah, and you could use Sonic Fighters with this.
Right.
Because they didn't have to fit in it, they had to fit on it.
Right. Snake Eyes Battle Gear set, so this was your year 2 Battle Gear set. Collector case was just a collage of artwork from previous package artwork, and then the Ninja Power Bow. I think that was actually owned by a Hasbro subsidiary company that made that Ninja Power Bow.
Yeah, that was a different Hasbro Direct.
Okay.
So Hasbro Direct was the promotional arm for a long time.
Right.
And then that went away. When we had this sort of final reorg, the team I had, which had created the Mask, and we had done Beast Wars for Transformers, we all got dispersed. I ended up going to this team.
Oh, okay.
And then this is the label for the carry case, which was another really difficult project because we wanted to do a decal, and then we couldn't find one that would work and pass our guidelines of, temperature. We'd already tooled this thing. Okay, so what's like we weren't going to do it.
You tooled up that whole case?
That
wasn't an off-the-shelf case?
No, we tooled up the whole case. And so we couldn't get the label to work. So the manufacturing guy said, well, we can print it on cardstock and then we can rivet it all around. So we did. But that cardstock absorbs moisture and then it ripples. And that's what happened. Basically, we should not be in the carry case business.
I mean, I've had the case. Mine, I'm glad to report mine was not rippled.
Yep, good.
All right, so 1993, this is year 2 of Ninja Force. Ninja Force must have been doing well. This was going to be year 2 of the DEF.
Yes.
So interestingly, you guys produced the product with the G.I. Joe DEF branding and Partnership for Drug-Free America on the back and everything. It didn't roll out in the United States that way. It did roll out in Australia and New Zealand that way on U.S. packaging. Do you recall how that happened?
Just like anything else, like if it doesn't work in the U.S., all the other countries are watching the U.S. to see what worked. And if it's already got existing inventory and it's going to work, then they put that, then they'll just take it over.
The electronic battle flash is gone, though.
That mechanism just did not work as brilliantly as we thought it was going to be.
Okay.
The flash just was not that big a deal.
Some of the accessories, like Mutton Junkyard, they came with this brilliant net launcher on the first release, but then it was swapped out for a fully opaque launcher. Do you recall the decision to make the fully opaque accessories without the lights?
The first assortment didn't do well. The mechanisms just weren't all that compelling when we went into production. Like the light just was not bright enough.
Sure.
And we made the decision, okay, let's just go back to a basic assortment format. And that's when we started to introduce, these
weapons trees.
Right. And this is another one where I think we got tired.
Well, you guys were producing so much for 93. It was ridiculous how many figures you produced. There was no way. Look, I'll be honest, I never pull punches. I hate weapons trees. Because it takes away the individuality of each character. If they don't have unique weapons, it's just a figure.
And the reason we did this was because we found out that the cost of doing the tree was less than doing individual weapons on there. Or why do we do them based on existing weapons and not create new weapons and then start to shuffle them around? We should have done a different one for each figure for at least a year. Like there's no reason this one and this one have to be the same. In the same assortment, it didn't have to be that way.
Right.
But that's just part of the decisions that you make when you're looking at how many resources do you have and all the rest of it. But we're basically getting charged for all this plastic we never use. So can we make it so that we can give the kids
so that it
more?
appears like they're getting more.
More, right.
Yeah. All right, so DEF went away. I thought you might enjoy seeing the card backs that came out in Australia, though.
Oh, so funny.
Okay, so this is Battle Corps, 1993. The reason I segued this was these DEF figures were rolled into Battle Corps. So we still got all of those figures. We just got them as part of Battle Corps. Battle Corps is so big, you see how small I have to make them on the page. I give up. You burn me out, too. All right, this was a fun line. So Kirk's take on this is you guys had acquired Play-Doh as one of the brands that came with that big Tonka Kenner deal, right?
Yeah.
And senior leadership came to Kirk and said, we want you to figure out how to work in some of these brands with G.I. Joe. So you guys picked Play-Doh as one that might work.
No, that's not how it happened.
All right, great. Tell me what happened.
That's not how it happened.
Okay.
Yeah, we had acquired Play-Doh, but no one ever told us we needed to use Play-Doh. In fact, they were nervous that we were going to call it Play-Doh.
So they didn't want you tarnishing the Play-Doh brand with your G.I. Joe?
Not at all. We were looking for themes, right? So one of the themes that we came up with was monsters within G.I. Joe. What does that look like? Why does it make sense? So the idea was kind of coming out of this eco-warrior, chemical experimentation. We thought, okay, bioengineered monsters could be a thing.
Dr. Mindbender's been there since 86.
Exactly. So we started to talk about how to do that. Can we look at some of the inspiration from the 1986 Aliens film, where you've got these really cool colonial Marines and marry them up with these monsters? So we came up with this backstory that these were all bioengineered Cobra soldiers. And then we came up with the idea of Mega Marines, and that gave us the impetus of what kind of feature we could be. And Dave Kunitz actually came up with this idea of using dough as moldable armor, and came up with this basically little mold to give us kind of a deluxe price point. So it was never we were asked to put dough in it, never. Right. And this dough was made in China, and Play-Doh was made in Massachusetts.
Oh, wow.
They had been experimenting with dough in China for other markets, which is why we could do this. But we were absolutely prohibited from calling it Play-Doh, which we didn't want to call it Play-Doh anyway. Yeah. I love these figure designs. I think some of the colors are just a little bit too much, but I like this guy a lot. I never really liked these at all. It just feels like we're not standing back looking at it and saying, can we make it darker? Can we make it actually look realistic? Can we make the sculpting not so big? It's totally out of scale.
Was that an objective?
No.
Okay.
Not to be this big.
I speculated, along with other folks have speculated, that this was a direct response to the scale of Ninja Turtles.
No, not at all. It was not supposed to be this big, and then when we realized it was going to be this big, it was too late to shift.
Wow.
And we had to go with it. We had to change the pricing on it. You can't charge the same for this as you do this one.
Yeah.
And that's also why we had to come up with a logo for it called Mega Monsters, because it was going to be a different price point.
Right.
Mega Marines! Cobra City's Mega Monsters are unstoppable! The Mega Monsters attack with crushing tentacles and gruesome gut bombs. But G.I. Joe Mega Marines come equipped with pressure-molded bioarmor.
Battle damage!
And here's the G.I. Joe Monster Blaster APC with its lock-and-load cannon!
Lock, load, fire!
Mega Marines come with bioarmor, Cobra Mega Monsters, and G.I. Joe Monster Blaster APC sold separately.
You Cobra monsters are pretty tough, but I'm gung-ho!
This is another one where the mechanism is over-dictating the size of the buck. It was originally meant to be this, right? Not this.
Okay.
And then this got thrown in when somebody said, you know, we should have these monsters that go with it. Well, they didn't have to be that like this. This is totally out of scale. And it's like it's designed by another toy company.
Yeah.
Not everything comes out the way you want it to.
All right, so this is year 2 of Ninja Force. Got Scarlet, we got Snake Eyes, we got Zartan, so the Arashikage clan showing up. Let's see, Street Fighter 2. So Kirk has told this story pretty well, but basically they weren't doing any licensed toys yet, and he went and pitched it to them, and before you guys knew it, it was a $30 million segment.
How this happened was Kirk was down at Bonnet Shores, Rhode Island with his son.
Yep.
And there was a video game in the arcade.
Right.
And everybody was around it.
USA!
And so he went to go find his son, who's playing it, and noticed Guile, who looked like a G.I. Joe character.
Sure.
And Kirk's watching it and said, you know, why can't we bring a license to G.I. Joe? And then he went out and pitched it.
Right.
And they weren't doing anything. And they agreed to do this co-branding, which is really funny because 30 years later, Hasbro is doing a collaboration between Street Fighter II and Transformers.
Nice.
So anyway, it was one of the first big fighting games. And the characters were really good. And then this ended up leading us to do the Street Fighter movie. With Jean-Claude Van Damme, but not attached to G.I. Joe.
Right. So you co-branded this one. You put the G.I. Joe logo on it. That's why it's in the book. Also, the live-action commercials featured live-action Duke.
It's the most lethal G.I. Joe team yet. Capcom Street Fighter 2! No way! Wait! There's Guile, Ryu, Zangief, Blanca, and Dalcine! What's a Dalsim? Oh!
The file cards didn't write them into the story, though, and they never appeared in the comic book.
That's right.
So they're really only tangentially related. But the artwork is great, and they are branded G.I. Joe, so I put them in. Yeah, man, let's talk about these armor tech.
This was kind of, again, a futuristic approach to exosuits that we were starting to see in movies and in cartoons like Exo Squad. That's what we want to show. What's the future of military looking like? So it started off with that robot. He was badass when it was olive drab, green, and black.
I think I show that on the next one. I wanted people to see that.
Oh, that's not even his color. That's a foam model of Bill's prototype. The real one was beautiful. So we wanted to do that figure, and then we wanted to do figures that went with it. And the idea was to make them look like they had an armored spacesuit on. Again, we go sort of the nth degree that means we have to change all the articulation, and everything's going to be way bigger than we really need it to be. And we end up making, you know, fairly limited articulated figures. So we design this buck, right, first, and then the buck decides the sculpting to it. And I think this is one where we just didn't push hard enough to do something that was really, really good. Everything looks like it's Hulkbuster, right? When it was not intended to be like that.
Right.
Again, probably pushed on time.
So I definitely think 1993 Star Brigade, y'all were going at a breakneck speed to try to cut off Kenner bringing back Star Wars.
That's right.
How Kirk tells it.
And it was taking advantage of how big Star Trek had been.
Okay.
Because when Next Generation came out, Galoob had the rights first, and it did nothing the first year. But then 2 years later, it found its audience, and then Playmates took it over. And Playmates did some really great sculpts, which was new, to like get a likeness. And they did extremely well for a number of years. I mean, they did over $100 million of it. So we saw that, and we saw what was going to happen with Star Wars, and we didn't want to be left in the dust. So we created armor tech. That was the first thing. So as we're going down that road, knowledge of that, you know, Kenner might be doing Star Wars or whatever, made our president say, wait a minute, let's pull it back. Let's make this look like space, not this military thing. So then we redeco the armor bot.
It was originally a terrestrial vehicle, though, right? Yeah. It was a ground vehicle.
Yeah.
And so you changed it to a space vehicle.
Well, we tried to, right? Yeah. So it was meant to be in space, so we made it white, changed the deco, because we're already tooling the thing. We weren't going to change that. And then we needed to create other vehicles, because he wanted a line. So these are 2 existing vehicles. Yep. That one was the Pogo, and this one was...
the Cobra Stellar Stiletto.
Yeah, and we changed this to be a G.I. Joe vehicle.
Yep.
And then we already had the Armortech figures.
Right.
Well, these are more expensive figures, so we need some lower priced figures. So some new figures, some are redecos to get to that lower thing. And then that was the first, thing out the door.
Right. What was the first thing out of the door?
This grouping of Armortech figures here, and then the armor bot in the 2 vehicles. That was the first thing. Okay. This came then shortly after.
Right. And so that was because the president said you need to do more space figures?
Yeah. Okay. Because of Star Wars coming.
You'll notice on the card art the repetition of card art across all those figures.
Right.
Right? That was the first time you guys had done that. So I'm sure that was just a time constraint thing, but I'd like your confirmation.
Okay, it is.
Number 2, so Payload was featured on the card art using the original Payload mold, the pilot from the Defiant that was also released with the Crusader. I think this is just a theory that us archivists come up with, You guys didn't have the mold for Payload.
Okay, so here's the thing. Once something leaves, it never comes back. It's gone forever.
So was that what happened with Payload?
Yeah.
He just disappeared? You
can't get it back.
So you remember having to tag out Payload and tag in this Eco Warriors barbecue instead? Do you recall having to use the duplicated art across all those figures? It was just a time constraint?
It was a time constraint. We were going so fast.
Yeah, you guys were moving fast in 93. Y'all were producing a ton of volume. Yeah. This speaks to the rollout of them in the waves that you were doing. So this kind of supports my quarterly rollout theory where you're adding new product each quarter. Mm-hmm. So 4 rollouts of the card backs. This is the 93 promotions. So
comic books are awesome.
And you did the live action trading cards.
I think I like the magnets better than the comic books, but they were both really good.
Yeah. The trading cards were freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, live action G.I. Joe was great.
The big thing about 1993 and 1994 was we had key driver vehicles, like this one. Mm-hmm. This was a big deal for us.
Oh yeah, that was an awesome plane.
And then we did the Rhino as part of the 12-inch series.
First 12-inch vehicle in decades.
We had 4 driver items in 1 year in the 4th quarter.
Oh wow.
That's really hard to do because you need a fair amount of money to drive any one product, never mind 4. Looking back at time, we got too product heavy, not thinking about that.
Sure. So you can tell how late in development the Armortech ones were because you were using silhouettes of another toy line.
Yeah, this is from Transformers Action Master, and so is that one.
Yep, you were teasing product that wasn't even developed yet.
Yeah, that's how late it was.
And then the Mega Monsters, these look like their presentation artwork.
They are.
They were featured there, and he didn't have the tentacles or anything.
Right. The other thing that was occurring at this time, the 12-inch series that came out in 91 had mushroomed to over $30 million by this time. So, we were doing about 100 million, 30 of it
was 12-inch.
It was by far the biggest segment.
So still 3 3/4 was only pulling 60, 70.
That's right. And it was all split into these different segments. Different groups. So it was a lot of variety. We got a lot of credit for all the different innovation that we have. We could not get past the lack of awareness that G.I. Joe had with current kids.
Because no media.
No media. And the advertising did its job, but it wasn't going to ever make up for that.
So you had a smaller and smaller collector pool.
Well, smaller consumer pool, because we weren't thinking collector at this point in time. Right. And as that shrunk, we're trying to sell them more product to make up for the dollars, and that looks good on paper, but doesn't actually happen in real life.
Now the Joes charge into battle with the Rhino, the official assault vehicle of the Hall of Fame team, with explosive lock and load cannon. Fire! G.I. Joe! A G.I. Joe Rhino can hold up to 4 Hall of Fame figures. Other figures sold separately.
The 12-inch scale, I'm not sure if it took dollars away from the rest of the line or if it was all additive, because that clearly had a dad interest in it.
Nostalgia from the 60s, 70s collectors.
Exactly. I'm glad we had it because it was the first time that I'd been working on it where we got over $100 million. But it also was not really driving what we thought was the core business. The move from this to this was just to, okay, we've done this for a number of years.
Yeah.
How are we going to change it?
And it came with Battle Core, right? You guys did a significant rebrand in '93 to introduce the Battle Core line. So you dropped in the lasers and you finally got rid of the horizontal lines that you had since '86.
Exactly.
So that was a slight brand tweak, for '93.
Yeah.
You also stretched the package from 6x9 to 6x10.
Yeah.
So you made it taller.
It was made because retail wanted everything to be the same.
So that was actually pushed by retailers. We need a 10-inch card.
You got to match what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, so Batman figures are 10 inches. You need to be...
Right.
They didn't want to have to move their pegs for you guys.
No, because it costs money.
Yeah. All right, here's the first 12-inch vehicle in decades.
Yeah, beautiful illustration.
Do you remember, were the 12-inch vehicles as successful as the figures were?
Yeah. I mean, certainly the figures were going to outsell it, but we sold 50,000. It was really good. We sold almost 500,000 of these.
Wow.
These other vehicles did nothing.
Yeah, but they were gimmicky. It's like you had a play feature and you stuck it on a vehicle.
I think what we were doing was we were in the process of evolving into a figure brand, and we kept thinking we had to still do vehicles for everything.
The Ninja Force was known for their spring action feature.
Yeah.
So it's like somebody thought you had to do that with the vehicles too.
Yeah, an inventor came in with something like that.
Yeah.
And I get it, but it was we have a successful figure concept. Oh, let's do vehicles with it.
Yeah.
Not realizing that the market was changing into much more figures than vehicles.
Right.
And we missed that. Then when we were looking for what we're going to do in 94 and 95, clearly 94 was the 30th anniversary, so we got permission to have this whole big extravaganza that culminated in the convention that was on the USS Intrepid.
G.I. Joe is ready to rock into the next 30 years and beyond. And 1994 is his year to party with our G.I. Joe 30th year salute. A non-stop celebration of the stuff that heroes are made of. And you are there as an entire nation goes for the Joe. On land, at sea, and in the air. The next 30 years start today. This is the year. G.I. Joe 1994. Go for the Joe.
That was wonderful to be part of, but we all knew that things were ending before we got there.
You guys got notification before you even went on the Intrepid.
Of course.
When you showed up on Monday, you weren't on G.I. Joe anymore.
But we went on it. We went anyway.
So bittersweet, man.
It was. Everybody is fortunate that they were there.
Yeah.
At the end of the best.
Yeah.
And not being attached to the extreme that came afterwards.
Right.
G.I. Joe Extreme! Extreme new heroes! Extreme new villains! Extreme new firepower! Slam, slam, slam! G.I. Joe Extreme! Extreme times call for extreme heroes! Figures and vehicles sold separately. Slam!
I remember us running the logo sideways. And we got so much great credit for that from retail.
And then they've killed it.
Yeah.
Y'all did the most daring packaging rebrand of the 13-year run at the 11th hour of the 13-year run.
Yeah, I got credit from a lot of people from pushing that design. And the graphics team came up with it because we were looking for something up to speed.
It gave more room for the art. Like,
right.
look at Lifeline's card back there. He's top to bottom on that card. That works really well. You didn't make it out with all of them, though.
No, we did not.
Let me pull it up right here. So these are the ones that made it out with the vertical card backs, but this is the whole main line.
This was the best look we had come up with. And I just wish, not that it would have changed anything, but it would have looked better.
You guys went to the USS Intrepid August 21st, 22nd of 1994. Were the rest of them slated to come out like that fall, that winter?
Yeah.
And then it just didn't happen.
Didn't happen.
As a collector, that drives me crazy too, because I have all the horizontal card backs, and then I wanted to have all the vertical card backs and only got some of them.
Yeah, things had been underway for quite some time to make that kind of change that fast. But it was, let's just wipe the slate clean, take a year off, start all over again.
And let Sergeant Savage fill that year void.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you can go for the Joe that formed the team. Get a special Hall of Fame G.I. Joe figure by mailing in 20 proofs of purchase from G.I. Joe Action Figures.
So you did a pretty darn big promotion for the General Joseph Colton figure, though. There's an 8.5 by 11 flyer on the left, and then there was a trade ad on the right.
Yeah.
This was a big deal, and it was the first time you guys actually ran a trade ad for one of these promotions. Do you recall the effort behind getting this one out there?
The 30th anniversary was meant to be a big initiative, right? We spent over $1 million on just the promotion for that.
Wow.
And we had a lot of components to it, and we tracked it, all through the year. Mm-hmm. It was also the beginning of developing Sergeant Savage, which is why that illustration is by Joe Kubert.
Joe Kubert, yeah.
Who I have Sergeant Savage and things all autographed from him.
Oh, nice.
It was the beginning of introducing him and basically the new illustration look we were going to use, right?
Yeah.
And the 12-inch figure was so popular, we could not do something with 12-inch. Mm-hmm. So that's why we did both a small one, 3 3/4 inch, and a 12-inch one in there. And it was meant to really be the big thing. And G.I. Joe never had a name. Right. Kirk invented that based on his son, Colton. It worked.
Now he's Bruce Willis in a movie.
Exactly, exactly.
The 3 3/4 inch scale and the 12-inch scale with the exact same figure, you also did that for the 30th anniversary figures.
We did, because you couldn't deny how big the 12-inch scale piece of business was. We didn't want to alienate anybody. But we also didn't want it to be just about 12-inch scale, which really celebrated the 30th anniversary of 12-inch.
All right, so this was another example of doing duplicate card art across the line. Was it a speed thing? Was it a cost thing?
Speed thing.
Okay. And so an inventor came in with this color change plastic.
The same vendor that had shown us the paint showed us how you could immerse it into the plastic itself, and then be able to make it basically go away. For the most part, it worked pretty well.
G.I. Joe Shadow Ninjas, masters of invisibility. Dunk them in warm water, invisibly concealed. Douse them with cold, true colors revealed. Stealth warriors with fast action ninja moves. Karate kicks, secret ninja tricks. Shadow Ninjas. Each sold separately. Color change takes 30 seconds.
Let's talk about the Manimals. It's my understanding, these were shown in the Toy Fair catalog, so I don't think I'm speaking out of hand here. This was a 1994 product that just didn't make it out.
Right.
So this was going to be fall or winter of 1994.
Yep.
And it just got canceled. That's his original prototype in the middle, that alligator guy.
Yeah.
Do you remember seeing any of that?
Oh yeah, all of it.
Did he come in and meet with you guys?
He came in and met with Steve DeGuano.
Yep.
And then we saw this concept in another meeting afterwards. The unfortunate thing with these, again, is there's no continuity with anything else that we did. Mm-hmm. It's a totally different figure buck. And it was pushed on us to create aliens as part of Star Brigade, again, with this fear of Star Wars coming back, which it didn't. Mm-hmm. And it was just pushing too much stuff at the same time.
Right. Animals was intended to be late 1994. It's my understanding that the Ninja Commandos were also meant to be late 1994. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the Ninja Commandos?
Yeah.
Road Pig as a ninja, for example. So you can confirm those were intended late 1994. Yeah. All right, so this was Ron Rudat's return to the line, which I thought was really cool to see him doing G.I. Joe in 1992 and see how his art style evolved, because this 1992 illustration by him is very different than what he was doing in 86. But he helped create the humanoid figures for 1994, and Kurt Groen did all the alien figures for 94.
I just don't think we should have done aliens.
Yeah.
I just think we pushed it too far. We needed to keep it grounded in sort of the future military. Mm-hmm. And when we got pushed to do space, then that sort of opened up this sort of Pandora's box of, oh, well, now we got to do aliens.
So who was pushing you to do aliens?
Oh, our president was.
Was that Alan at the time?
No. Alan was the CEO. It was Larry Bernstein.
Oh, okay.
And Larry was fantastic to me. He just thought that we could ride the coattails of somebody else, and we can't. We needed to have the show back. Mm-hmm. But the show was, was a lot of money, and with declining sales, how do you draw the line and say, well, the show is going to make it work? You can't just spend money and hope it's going to be there. That's not a plan.
Not when you're a publicly traded company. Right?
Exactly.
Still cool to see Ron Rudat back on the tail end of things.
Yep.
This was the beautiful branding, man. So you got the vertical branding on the Star Brigades. It seemed to me like the cadence, and I'm just guessing, that the early Battle Corps stuff came out horizontal cards. Second wave of Battle Corps came out horizontal cards. Third wave of Battle Corps came out vertical cards. Star Brigade came out vertical cards. If Manimals would have come out, vertical cards.
Right. That was the shift.
Mid to late 94, all vertical.
Yeah.
All right, so then we got the 30th anniversary stuff. The card art was totally recreated by Doug Hart because they didn't have any of these original paintings.
Yeah.
He had to recreate those. cool that you guys went back to that. More product photos. So remember these power fighters?
Yeah.
They knocked off Exo Squad.
Right.
So can you speak to where did the power fighters concept come from? Was it outside?
No. We had an outside inventor come in with some mechanized exosuits. And we wanted to incorporate them as part of Star Brigade. So we put those together, but those were in window boxes because we were trying to show what the product really looked like.
Yeah. And it was pre-assembled. You're no longer in the days of model kits.
Right.
Were you cognizant of Exo Squad and looking at that as inspiration, or we should take this invention because we can?
We were cognizant of Exo Squad, and Aliens had, a similar thing with Ripley in that. So it was all that kind of thing. Yeah.
So these were released in '94. This was released at the convention. I believe this one was too. Kirk Bazigian gave me this skydiving postcard and said that this figure was decoed, inspired by them.
I completely forgot about that figure.
It was just at the Intrepid.
Yeah.
So that's a cool look at the unadorned artwork for all the 1994 stuff. Maybe not all of it, but a good portion of it. So it just shows like the volume of figures that you guys did in '94. Yeah. So you did a lot of figures. You did not do a lot of vehicles. As a matter of fact, this is it.
Yeah.
4 vehicles for '94. So what was happening with vehicles that you went from what you were just describing, late '93, rolling out 4 big vehicles with drivers, to '94 where you're just doing 4?
Our plan was to run the existing 4 again.
Oh, just keep that going. These were probably like mid '94 releases due to the packaging, right?
Yeah.
That vertical logo packaging. So you released a bunch of '93 stuff late.
Yeah.
And then you released these mid '94 once you'd done the brand refresh. Yeah. Timing's making sense. And then that was your last 12-inch vehicle.
And that was cool. That had a trailer that attached to the Rhino. Yeah.
So this is the unreleased section where we show some of the stuff that never came to fruition. Have you ever seen that Duke painting?
Yeah.
Doug Hart created it. It looks like 1993 Duke, just recolored for jungle fatigues as opposed to desert BDUs. But we didn't know what this one was created for.
Yeah.
We have a theory that he was the figure that was going to come with this. And there is a package proof that has a product photo that shows a green Duke.
Oh, you're bringing back memories looking at some of these illustrations now.
Man.
Wow.
I mean, I'd love to just get without me telling you what I think they are, I'd love to see if you have any recollections of like where each of these started. Because I know some of them were developed years prior, but then were going to be released in '95 or late '94.
Yeah. Wow.
Now these have shown up with package proofs. So we know this was going to be the Seawolf, and this was going to be the Battle Station Portable Arctic Defense Platform.
Yeah.
This was marked Battle Corps, not Battle Corps Rangers. And this was marked Battle Corps, not Battle Corps Rangers also.
Yeah.
The Battle Corps Rangers were the smaller vehicles. We'll get to that on the next page, but the 3 of them are down here.
Yeah, those were from '95.
Yep. All right, but the other figures, we got Duke in the top left.
Yeah.
I've got him marked as Star Brigade because the 1994 licensing book that we got our hands on showed him as Star Brigade Duke.
Yeah. No, that was meant to be for Star Brigade.
But these numbers on them indicate that these were originally going to be Mega Marines figures because they're a continuation of the numbering that was on all the Mega Marines.
Yeah, it could have been that we were going to extend Mega Marines, had done the sculpt and said, okay, we're going to use it for Star Brigade now.
Right. So you just kind of cut off a second year of Mega Marines and instead we're going to repurpose these. So he was going to be a Battle Corps figure, and you can actually see him right there, and you can see him up there. Dr. Mindbender supposedly was in development for Mega Marines as well, and the Baroness.
Yeah.
So these were all kind of repurposed prior designs. This is an illustration of that figure.
Yeah.
Right? This was from a wrapping paper.
Yeah.
One of the only licensed products that came out.
You notice nobody has a gun in their hand.
I do. The paper company had to take the weapons out.
Yeah, we had to take them out for them.
Oh, really? Yeah. You guys did that line art?
Yeah.
Any other recollections on these guys? Were these late '94 or?
I don't think this was Mega Marines or this one. I think these were always part of Battle Corps because we had talked about doing Dr. Mindbender and Baroness again because we hadn't done them in a really long time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, beautiful illustrations.
The 1994 licensing guide showed 2 versions of each character, a more high-tech version and a more military realism. So you'll see 2 Dukes side by side.
Yeah.
That's the Star Brigade Duke and then the traditional Duke. It was our thinking that you guys were going to do double releases of each character, each personality, but with very different missions, right?
Oh, was not planned.
No?
It's only because of the artwork that was available. It was never part of the product plan.
Okay. Yeah. Good to know.
We picked these illustrations because we thought they would work best on licensed product, regardless of the character.
Yeah, it's just line art.
Yeah.
So this was the Battle Corps Rangers.
And the reason that we called it Battle Corps Rangers instead of Battle Corps is we got sued by Leonard because we called it Battle Corps, which they thought was an affront to their line called The Corps. It was kind of funny because Leonard was a knockoff of G.I. Joe and copying our designs of figures and everything else, and yet they're complaining because we're using the word Corps, which they didn't have a trademark on. I had to go and testify to do a deposition that I wasn't even thinking of their thing. I was using Battle Corps as a play on words because we were talking about the core military version of G.I. Joe. To placate them, we said we'd change it to Battle Corps Rangers.
Wow, I've never heard that story.
Yeah.
I thought Battle Corps Rangers was just to signify that you guys were moving more towards your military roots.
No. Battle Corps was meant to do that.
Yeah.
And then, we didn't want to get into a fight, so we decided to make the change.
Sure.
All of these were going to be awesome, low-priced vehicles, and the first ones that were going to be made offshore.
Right. I really like the Vortex.
Yeah.
And I like the eel as well. It looks like a mini Shark 9000.
Yeah, it does.
It looks like it has the same mine launcher that the Avalanche had.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were cool, man.
And these Ninja figures were going to be great.
Now, there are 2 Paintmaster decos that have come up for the Ninja Commandos. Mm-hmm. So 2 entirely different paint schemes. Same figures, different paint schemes. And then with these 2 paintings, it's the exact same figure, same mold, same details, but with an entirely different paint scheme. Do you recall the plan to use a mold twice to make 2 different figures? Not at all?
No. I can't, for the life of me, try to figure out why we would have done that in the same year.
So you don't think like 6 months you'd roll it out as one and then 6 months later you'd roll it out? There was no plan?
No plan like that. That was not the plan.
Yeah.
That was not the plan.
Similarly with the Ninja Commandos at the bottom there, we found 2 different sets of Paint Masters that have entirely different decos. And so the theory there was that, they'd be released one way and then 6 months later they'd be released another way.
No.
Okay.
No, never. No.
A good part of doing these interviews is to dispel theories. We look at the data points and we try to figure it out, and we try to be as scientific as possible.
Some collectors actually think that Pimp Daddy Destro was a good idea. And certainly people at Hasbro do because they did a 6-inch version of it. It was a mistake. And it was a joke that got in the wrong box, that got to China as a paint master.
It wasn't intentional at all?
Never.
Oh, wow.
Never. Why people think that that's popular, that you're going to make this is where this legend and folklore come in. Mm-hmm. Certain things are not as big or popular as you thought they were.
Right. So, well, it's the scarcity of that. It's like the Black Dolphin. Nobody cares that there's a Black Dolphin. They care that there was only 24 released.
Right.
Like 24 got in the wild. So Pimp Daddy Destro, he made it to stores, a handful. And so it's just the scarcity of it that then makes him popular. It's not because it was a brilliant idea. The voiceover talent, Arthur Burgart, thinks it's incredibly insulting.
Yeah.
Right? This is like politically maybe not the best thing to be continuing to promote because they licensed it to Diamond Direct and they recently made a statue of Pimp Daddy Destro way after the 6-inch figure that came out. So they're continuing to let this bad idea resurface.
It's because no one's there to tell them.
Yeah. The replicators, were they Inventor brought in?
Yep, okay, Inventor brought in. Yep. And the idea was to create almost like an Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of thing coupled with the original Aliens movie.
Where the thing popped up out of the stomach, which is awesome.
And this was not meant to be an alien that burst out and killed the host. It was not meant to be that.
Were these meant to be the original characters, or
no,
were these clones?
These were not even clones. These were meant to be replicas, or you know how Krang from
Ninja Turtles,
like that.
Yeah.
That's what it was meant to be like.
Okay.
And when you pushed on the little button in the back, it would push the creature into the membrane, and you could see the shape of it. But it was never meant to like pop out of it.
I've seen a rough, basically like a sales video that did a rough draft commercial that showed how some of these worked.
Yeah.
And like you'd push it and it'd be like, it'd like fall out. And that was kind of the extent of it.
Yeah.
The mysterious replicators are evil alien monsters that have cloned the bodies of G.I. Joe and Cobra and are hiding inside for a surprise attack. What's that bursting out of Gung Ho's chest? Look out! Replicator Destro's body explodes on the scene to reveal wicked tentacles. The Joe's strangest enemies ever have arrived.
I guess the illustrations are the best part of it.
The illustrations are beautiful.
The lighting of it.
Yeah. And so you guys were using external illustrators. That's also notable because that clearly is package art. That's refined and ready to go to packaging. So that would be a step away from, Bob Lavoie and Doug Hart and the internal illustrators. You also did that with Street Fighter II, so it's not unprecedented. But anyway, as we all know, August 1994, basically everything got canceled. The vertical cards didn't come out. The Ninja Commandos didn't come out. The Manimals didn't come out. Do you recall this illustration at all?
No.
Doug Hart painting. Obviously, it was a re-release of the Cobra Piranha and the G.I. Joe Barracuda.
It looks like they're using the Dolphin again.
Yes, and that's Deep Six, the mail order yellow one that you've seen. So there's the Dolphin, there's the Deep Six.
Maybe this was supposed to be a mail order set.
But why would they do the painting for a mail order?
That they needed it for the catalog.
Okay.
Because we would have not done it for a product like this.
Yeah. Nobody's been able to nail that down. The weird thing about it is if you look at the illustration, Deep Six came out as a mail order standalone and Shipwreck came out in 1994. So trying to figure it out from a timing perspective, it's like maybe this artwork was generated in 93 or something as maybe a store pitch exclusive for a store that didn't go anywhere, and so then they were...
No, it wasn't a store exclusive.
You would have recalled
that.
Our
best bet at this is that this was an idea to do a mail order, maybe it's 2 sets.
Yeah, direct mail cross-sell catalog.
Yeah. And it got dropped because either there wasn't enough interest in it or they couldn't get the molds to it, or this was supposed to happen, in late 94, early 95 when the plug was pulled on everything.
All right, so there's another one. The Arctic Commandos Assault Team. Now let me back up to those mail order 1993 cards. They're called the Arctic Commandos.
Yeah.
And several of these figures are pictured in this set. So this Arctic Commandos came out in 1993.
So I would say that tells us that was definitely a direct mail order concept that they were planning on doing and then didn't do it. And I think the difficulty with these is it's great to do mail order when it's just a figure, right? Because you can make that in China, comes in a little tiny bag, and you can send them out. When you want to start doing stuff like this,
way more ambitious.
You have to get domestic manufacturing, which means you have to have a substantial forecast to even do it. And then you have to add the figures with it. And we never did a polar bear.
And it's impossible to say with direct mail what demand would have been. Right. So how do you forecast?
And this looks like a retail box.
It does. It's got the late 94 vertical stripe.
And I don't remember that logo at all.
So this one is just a mystery to me because if we know like this logo didn't come out until late 94, mid to late 94, and it made it to a full painting, but it's got these figures that came out in 93. This is Iceberg, right? Yeah. This is Snowstorm. And that's his original deco. That's not the 94 deco. These are 93 figures.
Yeah.
And then you have the 93 mail order there, and you got the 93 Frostbite there.
Yeah.
And then you add a polar bear in the mix.
It was never a retail product.
Yeah.
So the only thing I could think of is that they would do it as mail order, but they would not do a retail package.
Right. You never would. You never did.
No.
In 13 years of direct mail offerings, the vehicles came in a plain brown cardboard box.
Yeah. Illustration's awesome.
I think Doug did them.
Yeah.
This is the end, my friend.
What a deck.
This is the end.
Wow.
I've
well,
done
thank
my
you.
Research, man.
Thank you. I've so enjoyed it today. This has been not just a walk down memory lane. This is like half my life.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
I was there for 10.5 years, and it was, one of the finest times I've had as a marketer, product developer, and, a fan of all this stuff.
Right.
The thing that I get amazed with about, all the G.I. Joe collectors that I come into contact with is, I haven't been associated with this since I left Hasbro, which was 1999.
Right.
I mean, it's 24 years ago. It's such an amazing thing to me to see how people are still so passionate about this, even though we haven't had the product line for the longest time.
It just hasn't been surpassed. I mean, I think in our minds, it's an insurmountable high watermark for toy development.
It is, and I think a lot of it has to do with how action figures have changed. Yet through all of that, these things that you hold near and dear to your heart always seem to remain, always seem to be sort of the heat inside you that keeps driving you. Right. And I'm just amazed and grateful for all of you.
Well, you were part of something special, man. Everybody that I've talked to had the feeling like that it was lightning in a bottle, and they were lucky to have had the experience.
Absolutely, it was.
Nobody that I've interviewed about G.I. Joe that looks back on it like, oh, that was a part of my life.
Yeah, no.
I hated working on that brand. Like literally everybody that worked on it seems to have genuinely put their heart and soul into it.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't expect that anything we work on is going to matter decades from now. So I'm sure it feels special.
It is. When I've gone to the collector conventions or things like that, and just look at product I worked on, and what it's being asked to purchase for, I just shake my head. Like, I remember just churning through so many products. It's a big line.
Yeah. Well, and you guys blew it up 93. I mean, 93 was insane.
Yeah.
Just building 3djoes.com, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to make it through the 90s.
It was, 91 is when we did the first, G.I. Joe 12-inch. Yep. Then in 92, we started to expand it and realized we had a huge audience.
Yep.
And then 93, it was like, okay, we are unleashing everything.
Yeah.
And then that was a good roll. And then we went into 94, and it was just running out of gas. Mm-hmm. No matter what we did, we couldn't surpass, what we had achieved. And
it sucks that you feel like every year you have to surpass.
You do.
Yeah, I get it.
Public company, you got to grow every year.
Business is business.
Yeah.
I get that. But for a team that, I'm sure you guys burned yourselves out on 93.
Yeah.
To be told, okay, great, now what?
No, we got to do it again now in 94. And how are you planning on that?
I think one of the reasons that this has stayed so viable and important is because they're still just piggybacking on what y'all did back in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. They're just re-releasing it in new formats. Yeah. If it's, in the 2000s, it was literally reusing old molds with new colors.
Right.
That's how they got through the 2000s. They started to develop some new figures and sprinkle them in there. 2007, okay, now we've got a highly articulate 4-inch version, more detailed. We're just going to re-release what you guys did in the 80s and 90s in that format, and that drug them through to maybe 2015. And then 2019, okay, now we're going to do 6-inch versions of what you guys did in the 80s and 90s. So it's, for us collectors, it's like, we feel like we were part of something special, the high water mark. And Hasbro is reaffirming that by just continuing to mine that IP, that story that was built up, those characters that were built up. So it's kind of like, I feel the same way with comic books. I grew up reading Chris Claremont's X-Men.
Yeah.
Every other X-Men movie you go to is pretty directly pulled from a Chris Claremont story that I read growing up. You know, if it's Dark Phoenix or the time traveling one or whatever, Apocalypse, Age of Apocalypse, it's all pulled from stuff we grew up with. So I feel really lucky that the toys I grew up and loved are still relevant and still being made. That property still being mined. The comics I grew up reading still being mined by Hollywood.
Yeah. Hopefully someday there's a way to bring, maybe the evolution of G.I. Joe. Maybe it's the evolution of a lot of these characters with a storyline that is exciting, that's compelling, that works for both collectors and for kids that are coming up.
Yeah. Well, you've had some success with it with Beast Wars.
Yeah.
Right? That was wildly different than G1, G2. Yeah. And now they're making a movie out of it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's got to feel rewarding as well.
Oh, it does. I get the biggest kick out of seeing it. And, that's something that I remember, all the ideation that we went through for all of that. And then seeing that happen now in live action is just amazing to me. It was always a labor of love. Yeah. And G.I. Joe was, my mobile command center. That's my favorite toy out of everything that's in this room.
Yeah. You grew up playing with that?
That was my number one Christmas gift, and those are the two G.I. Joes that I had with it. Now those are.
I read somewhere that the mobile command center was your favorite Christmas gift. I was like, that's not Christmas '87.
No.
Mobile command center from '87, the tackle box.
I was a little old for that.
Yeah, so Christmas '87 for me was the tackle box. Yeah.
And that was a great product.
It was.
Great toy.
I begged my mom for at least a year to get me the Terror Drome.
Oh wow!
Christmas comes around and I have this big box and I'm like, yeah, it's a Terror Drome. And I peel that thing open, it's the Mobile Command Center. And I like this little snot-nosed kid. I didn't cry, I didn't complain, but inside I was disappointed.
Yeah.
Because I wanted the Terror Drome. But my friend Evan Rivas got the Terror Drome for Christmas.
Oh, wow.
So I would take my Mobile Command Center to his house. I'd put my Mobile Command Center in one corner. He'd put his Terror Drome in the other. He'd fly his jet out. I'd fly my Conquest. We'd throw missiles at each other. And everything worked out.
That's beautiful. No, that's a great story.
It's the memories, man. It's what makes it still important to us.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I remember when my kids were younger, my two youngest, Michael and Sophia, they were thick as thieves, those two. Yeah. And Michael really took Sophia under his wing. And I remember going in our basement one day, and he didn't have a name for it, but he was basically playing flashcard action figures with Sophia. So he had all his Star Wars figures, because he was a Star Wars kid, all tucked behind him, and he was sitting on the floor, all behind him, and he would grab one out and show it to Sophia and say, "Okay, who's this one?" Right. And then she would say Chewbacca or whatever, and he never told her she was wrong.
Aww.
He would always say, "Well, do you think this one might be Princess Leia?" "Oh, yeah."
Right.
And that is just a cherished memory of how he plays with toys and helps his little sister. And they invented that himself. I didn't do it.
Right. And it shows how important the storyline was to him.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I'm sure he probably told her, like, what about a little bit to remember about each character.
And to this day, Carson, they talk to me about what the latest Star Wars movie is, what the latest Marvel movie is. Yeah. They're interested in, the things that I work on, in the toy industry. Mm-hmm. At the time when they were kids, it was like, what's your dad do? Yeah. He talks on the phone a lot, which I do, but like that's what they thought my job was talking on the phone a lot. Right. And then I took my youngest daughter to the HasCon, and she's like, "Oh, now I get a sense of what you do." She goes, "You're kind of famous, Dad." And I'm like, I'm not really famous. I said, just certain people really like the things that I worked on, and I'm grateful for that.
It's not just certain people, man. It's tens of thousands of people. It really is. I can look at the metrics on the website. Yeah. It's 1 million page views a year from 60,000 unique visitors. Like, wow. There's an impact.
Wow. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
That many people still care.
Yeah. Deep down, not everybody, but a lot of people, look back and they want to relive the best parts that they remember from their childhood.
Of course.
And that's where a lot of this stuff comes from.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And that's what it's been for me. Hasbro sucked me in 2007. I told you I'd put away G.I. Joe in 1990. 17 years went by. And then I saw the retro-inspired packaging of the new 4-inch highly articulated figures on the shelves at Target. And I saw the battle in the box, which was the Hiss tank versus the Mobat with some other smaller vehicle, Trouble Bubble maybe, and a Stalker and a jetpack flying, which was brilliant because that reminds me of the cartoon. Good marketing there, good job tapping into nostalgia both by the package artwork and the pairing of what you're actually selling. Exactly. So they were brilliant. They sucked me right back in. 2007, I never looked back.
Yeah. But not everything that was done in the past is truly nostalgia.
We don't need to redo everything that was done in the past. When I see the current G.I. Joe brand team go to the vault or the archive, they still have some stuff. And they pull some things out and they start talking about things they might want to do. They picked up Mega Viper, or the one with the tentacles, and they're like, let us know in the comments, should we redo this? I'm like, hell no. No. Bad idea then, bad idea now.
Bad idea then, worse idea now.
Yeah. So hopefully they don't, like you were saying, they don't look at the whole volume of work and just cherry pick things randomly. They need to give some thought to what things were actually successful, what things worked, but they're not going to have the numbers to know.
No, and you got to talk to people that you can trust.
Yeah. Right.
Because everybody's got an opinion.
Right.
But get somebody that's lived through that.
Well, they should talk to folks like you and Kirk that were plugged in and can tell them, Mega Monsters should have never turned out like that. Yeah. Don't repeat that mistake. Yeah. Armor tech was garbage. Don't repeat that mistake. Yeah. They should have y'all on as consultants, man. At least just, open line of communication. They could pay you by the hour.
I'm here. I'm happy to help.